His phone rang at exactly 2 a.m. Not once. Not twice. 3 times. Each vibration against the mahogany nightstand pulled Park Jin-woo deeper from sleep, dragging him from dreams into something far worse than any nightmare his subconscious could manufacture. The first ring he ignored. In his world, emergencies were measured in silence, the kind that preceded bullets, not phone calls. The second ring made his jaw tighten. His hand moved toward the device, fingers hovering above the screen where an unknown number glowed like a warning beacon in the darkness. The third ring made him answer. He brought the phone to his ear without speaking. Years of survival had taught him that the first voice reveals weakness, and Park Jin-woo had built an empire on revealing nothing. The voice on the other end was young. Female. American accented Korean, the words tumbling out fast and breathless. Mr. Park? You don't know me, but I found your daughter. She's hurt. Really hurt. Someone beat her. Bad. Jin-woo's blood turned to ice water in his veins, but his face remained carved from stone. His wife stirred beside him, and he rose from the bed with the fluid silence of a predator, moving toward the windows that overlooked the Seoul skyline. The city glittered below him like broken glass scattered across black velvet. Where is she? His voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of tectonic plates shifting before an earthquake. 81. Behind the Hamilton Hotel. There's an alley, the one with the blue dumpsters. She's conscious, but Mr. Park, her face. They really... Stay with her. Don't move. Don't call anyone else. I'm coming. He ended the call and stood motionless for 3 full seconds, his reflection ghost-like in the window glass. Behind that reflection, Seoul breathed and pulsed, unaware that somewhere in its neon-soaked streets, someone had just made the last mistake of their life. His daughter. Sohee. 19 years old, pre-med at Yonsei University, the one pure thing in his blood-soaked world. Someone had touched her. Someone had hurt her. The phone was still in his hand when the calculations began. Not the panicked thoughts of a father. He would allow himself that luxury later, in private, where weakness could be buried like bodies in Incheon's industrial district. No, these were the cold equations of a man who had spent 23 years turning Seoul's underground into his personal chessboard. Who knew Sohee's route home from her study sessions. Who had access to her schedule. Who stood to gain from striking at his heart instead of his empire. The list was shorter than it should have been. He paid his people well, ruled with calculated fairness, and made examples brutal enough that betrayal seemed like assisted suicide. But someone had done this anyway. Someone close enough to know she would be vulnerable. Someone who understood that hurting Park Jin-woo's daughter was a declaration of war. He moved through his penthouse like smoke, dressing in darkness, each movement precise and automatic. Black suit. White shirt. No tie. He might need to move quickly. The Beretta M9 went into his shoulder holster with practiced ease, and the Tonto knife slid into his boot like a secret made of folded steel. His phone lit up again as he reached the door. Same unknown number. He answered without greeting. Mr. Park? The young voice again, but different now. Scare. There's something else. She keeps saying a name. Over and over. She says it was family. The word hung in the air like a noose. Family. Not a rival clan. Not the Russians pushing into Gangnam. Not the Chinese trying to reclaim territory they'd lost 3 years ago. Family. Someone inside his inner circle had ordered this. Park Jin-woo's face remained expressionless as he stepped into the private elevator, but his reflection in the polished doors told a different story. His eyes had gone flat and dead, the way they always did before he reminded Seoul why his name was spoken in whispers and prayers. The elevator descended, and with each floor, his rage crystallized into something far more dangerous than anger. Purpose. 23 floors. 23 seconds to plan the death of someone he probably trusted. The doors opened onto the underground garage where his Mercedes G-Class waited like a black coffin on wheels. He had built his empire on 3 principles: loyalty, silence, and the absolute certainty that betrayal would be answered with extinction. Someone had forgotten that. He would make sure no one ever forgot again. Welcome to Forbidden Empire, where loyalty is tested in blood, power is absolute, and betrayal always comes with a price carved in flesh and bone. Tonight, a father's empire collides with the darkness reaching for his daughter. In Seoul's neon shadows, someone just learned that some lines should never be crossed. And Park Jin-woo always collects his debts. The Mercedes cut through Seoul's early morning streets like a shark through dark water, Jin-woo's hands steady on the wheel despite the hurricane building behind his ribcage. The city was never truly asleep. Even at 2:27 a.m., Itaewon pulsed with the kind of life that bloomed in darkness. Club kids stumbling between neon signs, taxi drivers hunting fares, street vendors selling tteokbokki to the drunk and desperate. His daughter was somewhere in this chaos, bleeding. The thought tried to crack his composure, but he buried it beneath 23 years of practiced control. Emotion was a luxury he couldn't afford. Not yet. Not until he understood the architecture of this betrayal. His phone, connected to the car system, showed the unknown number still active. He'd kept the line open, listening to the ambient sounds of the alley, his daughter's labored breathing, the distant thump of bass from nearby clubs, the occasional murmur of the girl who'd found her. "We're still here, Mr. Park?" The young voice again, steady now despite its obvious fear. "I got her sitting up against the wall. There's a lot of blood, but I think most of it's from her nose. Her breathing is okay." "What's your name?" Jin-woo asked, his voice calm enough to belong to a man asking about the weather, not racing toward his beaten daughter. Pause. "Does it matter?" "It matters." Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of a decision made. "Jasmine. Jasmine Wright. American." The accent made sense now. Military brat or English teacher's daughter, probably, living in Itaewon where the international community clustered like expatriate birds. She would have been walking home from one of the foreigner bars, stumbled into an alley, and found something that would tie her to Seoul's underworld whether she wanted it or not. "Jasmine," he repeated, committing the name to memory. "How did you find her?" "I heard sounds, like someone hitting something. By the time I got there they were already gone. Just so he lying there." Her phone was smashed, but her wallet was still in her bag. "They weren't trying to rob her, Mr. Park. They wanted to hurt her." Jin-woo's hands tightened on the steering wheel, the leather creaking under his grip. "Describe everything you saw. Every detail. No matter how small." The silence that followed was the sound of memory being sifted for truth. "She was on her side when I found her. Her dress was torn at the shoulder. There were marks on her arms, like someone grabbed her hard. Her face." The girl's voice cracked slightly. "Her left eye is swelling shut. Blood from her nose and mouth. But Mr. Park, it's her hands that scare me most." "Her hands?" "Her knuckles are split open." She fought back. "Art. Whoever did this didn't walk away clean." Something like pride flickered in Jin-woo's chest before being swallowed by rage. His daughter, raised in privilege but not weakness, had drawn blood from her attackers. It meant there would be evidence. DNA under her fingernails, skin cells, maybe hair. It also meant whoever ordered this had underestimated her, which told him something about their intelligence gathering. The Hamilton Hotel's distinctive blue-lit facade appeared ahead, and Jin-woo guided the Mercedes into a side street, killing the lights as he approached. Itaewon's alleys were a labyrinth of service entrances and forgotten spaces, perfect for violence that needed to stay invisible. He found the blue dumpsters Jasmine had mentioned and parked where the Mercedes blocked the alley's entrance. Anyone wanting in or out would have to go through him. The car door opened soundlessly, and Jin-woo stepped into the Seoul night with the practiced silence of a man who'd learned to move between worlds. The alley smelled of rotting food, stale beer, and beneath it all, the copper tang of fresh blood. His daughter was 30 meters away, propped against the wall exactly as Jasmine had described. The young black woman kneeling beside her looked up as he approached, her face a mixture of relief and terror. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe 22-23. Box braids pulled back from a face that would have been beautiful if not twisted with worry. She wore a Howard University sweatshirt and jeans, incongruous in this moment of violence. Her hands, he noticed, were covered in his daughter's blood. But it was so he who demanded his attention. His daughter looked small against the concrete wall, smaller than she'd ever seemed even as a child. Her face was a canvas of violence, left eye swollen into a purple-black mass, nose obviously broken, lips split in two places. Blood had dried in dark trails down her chin and neck, soaking into her torn dress. But she was conscious. Her one good eye found him as he approached, and something like relief crossed her battered features. "Appa," she whispered through swollen lips. The word father nearly broke him. But Park Jin-woo had learned long ago how to take pain and transform it into something useful. He knelt beside her with movements that betrayed nothing of the war raging in his chest. "I'm here." His hand found hers, carefully avoiding the split knuckles Jasmine had mentioned. "Don't talk. Just breathe." He looked to Jasmine, who was watching him with wide eyes that held a very reasonable fear. She knew who he was. Or at least she knew enough to be afraid. "You did well calling me," he told her. Stand up. Let me see her. Jasmine rose on unsteady legs, stepping back to give him space. Jinwoo conducted his examination with the efficiency of someone who'd assessed countless injuries over the years. Broken nose. Facial contusions. Possible fractured orbital bone. Bruising on her arms, defensive wounds that told a story of struggle. But it was her hands that interested him most. He lifted Sohee's right hand into the dim light filtering from the street. Her knuckles were split open, skin torn and bloody. He could see tissue beneath, and caught in that tissue what looked like synthetic fibers, probably from clothing. Sohee, he said quietly, his face close to hers. How many? 3. Her voice was barely audible, each word clearly causing pain. 3 men. They knew my name, Appa. They were waiting. The words confirmed what he'd already suspected, but hearing them made the betrayal concrete. This wasn't random violence. This was targeted. Orchestrated. Someone had given his daughter's location, her schedule, her vulnerability to men who specialized in exactly this kind of message. Did you recognize them? She tried to shake her head, winced at the pain. Masked. Black masks. But one of them, when he grabbed me, I smelled his cologne. Expensive. The same kind Uncle Sungmin wears. The name hung in the alley like a guillotine blade. Kim Sungmin. His right hand for 12 years. The man who'd stood beside him through the territorial wars, the Russian incursions, the brutal restructuring that had transformed his operation from a street gang into an empire. The man who'd held Sohee as a baby, who sent her birthday presents every year, who she called uncle despite no blood relation. Jinwoo's face remained perfectly still, but Jasmine, watching from her position against the opposite wall, took an unconscious step backward. Something in his eyes had changed, gone from merely dangerous to absolutely lethal. Jasmine, he said without looking at her. You have a phone? Yes, sir. Call this number. He rattled off 10 digits without checking his own phone, the number committed to memory like all numbers that mattered. Tell the man who answers that Phoenix needs a medical team at the Hamilton Hotel service entrance. Tell him to bring Dr. Kim. Then you're going to get in my car and wait. But you're in this now. His eyes finally shifted to her, and his voice, while not unkind, carried the weight of absolute certainty. The moment you found my daughter, you became part of something you can't walk away from. You can be protected or you can be vulnerable. Choose quickly. Jasmine's throat worked as she swallowed hard. Then she nodded, pulling out her phone with trembling fingers. Smart girl. She understood that witnessing this much of Park Jin-woo's world meant she was either an asset or a liability, and liabilities didn't live long in Seoul's shadows. While Jasmine made the call, Jin-woo returned his attention to Sohee. He removed his suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders, covering the torn dress and providing warmth against the shock setting into her system. Who else knew you were studying late at the library? He asked quietly. Just my study group. And mother. And her one good eye widened slightly. Mr. Choi. My driver. I told him I'd call when I was ready, but I decided to walk instead. It was only a few blocks and I wanted the air. Mr. Choi. Young Soo Choi, one of his junior drivers, assigned to Sohee 3 months ago when her previous driver retired. Recommended by Kim Sungmin. The architecture of the betrayal was beginning to take shape, each piece clicking into place with the horrible clarity of a chess game entering its endgame. Mr. Park? Jasmine had finished the call and was hovering nearby. Someone named Kong said they'd be here in 8 minutes. He asked if there were any complications that needed cleaning. By cleaning, Kong meant bodies. Evidence. The kind of aftermath that had to disappear before police could be bothered to pretend they cared what happened in Itaewon's alleys. No cleaning, Jinwoo said. Not yet. He wanted this scene preserved. Wanted his people to see what had been done. Wanted every man in his organization to understand the stakes before he began peeling back layers to find the rot underneath. The Mercedes was visible at the alley's entrance, its black bulk reassuring in its solidity. Jasmine moved toward it, glancing back once at Sohee with an expression that mixed pity and relief that it wasn't her lying there bleeding. Jinwoo watched her go, then turned back to his daughter. Sohee, he said softly, his hand gentle on her uninjured cheek. I need you to be strong for a little longer. Can you do that? She nodded, tears finally spilling from her good eye. They said this was a message, Appa. They said you'd understand. They said to remember that everyone has a daughter. The words were a knife between his ribs. Everyone has a daughter. It was more than just a threat to Sohee. It was a threat to the infrastructure of his entire organization, A promise that if he didn't respond to some ultimatum he hadn't yet received, the daughters of his lieutenants, his soldiers, his trusted men would all become targets. This wasn't about greed or territory. This was about control. Someone was trying to put a leash on Park Jin-woo, and they'd chosen his daughter as the demonstration of their seriousness. The sound of approaching vehicles pulled him from his thoughts. Two black SUVs materialized at the alley entrance, disgorging men in dark suits who moved with the coordinated efficiency of soldiers. Kang Min-ho, his head of security, led the group with Dr. Kim close behind, a medical bag already in hand. Kang was 53 years old, built like a concrete bunker, with a face that had stopped expressing anything resembling emotion sometime during his military service. He took in the scene with one sweep of his eyes, So-hee, the blood, Jasmine visible in the Mercedes, Jin-woo's position beside his daughter, and understood everything that mattered. "Sir," he said simply, the word containing volumes of unspoken loyalty. Dr. Kim, younger at 38 but no less competent, knelt immediately beside So-hee, his hands already assessing her injuries with practiced efficiency. He'd served as Jin-woo's personal physician for 6 years, treating everything from gunshot wounds to knife injuries, always without questions, always without records. "She needs a hospital," he said after 30 seconds of examination. "That orbital bone might be fractured and I want x-rays of her ribs. But I can stabilize her here first." "Do it," Jin-woo said, rising to his feet. He gestured to Kang, who moved close enough for private conversation. "Pull footage from every camera within 3 blocks. Traffic cams, security cams, private businesses. I want faces. I want license plates. I want everything." "Already in motion," Kang replied. "But sir, if this was inside." "It was." Jin-woo's voice was flat, emotionless. "Sungmin is involved. Possibly Choi. I want both of them located but not approached. Surveillance only. I want to know who they talk to, where they go, who they meet. If they so much as sneeze, I want to know about it." Kang's face revealed nothing, but Jin-woo knew the man well enough to read the tension in his shoulders. Kim Sungmin wasn't just a lieutenant, he was family by choice if not by blood. Investigating him meant investigating a man they'd all trusted for over a decade. "There's more," Jin-woo continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Convene the inner circle. All of them. Phoenix Tower 2 hours from now. Tell them it's about the Russian situation, make it sound routine. I want to see their faces when they learn what's happened. You think there are others? I think this kind of move requires more than 2 men." Jin-woo watched Dr. Kim work on his daughter, each efficient movement a small mercy. Someone planned this. Someone with resources and connections. Someone who thought they could hurt me and get away with it. "No one gets away with it," Kang said, and it wasn't bravado but simple statement of fact. Behind them, Dr. Kim had gotten So-hee's bleeding under control, her face now cleaned enough to see the full extent of the damage. She looked younger somehow, vulnerable in a way that made Jin-woo's chest constrict. "The girl in the car," he said to Kang. "Jasmine Wright. American. Run her name but do it quietly. I want to know who she is, why she was in Itaewon at 2 a.m., and whether her finding So-hee was coincidence or design." "You think she's involved?" "I think nothing is coincidence in my world." Jin-woo's eyes moved to the Mercedes where Jasmine sat in the front passenger seat, her face visible in the glow of her phone. "But my instinct says she's clean. She had opportunities to run, to call the police, to do a dozen things that would have complicated this night. Instead she called me. That speaks to either innocence or very sophisticated planning. I'll have answers by dawn." Jin-woo nodded, his attention returning to So-hee as Dr. Kim finished his preliminary treatment. The girl who'd left for a study session 12 hours ago looked like she'd been through a war, but she was alive, conscious, and, most importantly, she'd given him a name. Uncle Sungmin. The cologne had been deliberate, he realized. Whoever wore it had wanted So-hee to recognize the scent, wanted her to carry that information back to her father. It was a message within a message. "We're close enough to touch your family. We know your people. We are your people." "She's stable," Dr. Kim announced, rising to his feet. "But we need to move her soon. I've given her something for the pain, but that orbital bone worries me." "Take her to the private facility in Gangnam," Jin-woo ordered. "The one we use for sensitive cases. Full security detail. No visitors except family and whoever I explicitly clear." "What about her mother?" Jin-woo checked his watch, 2:47 a.m. His wife, Yoon-ji, would still be asleep in their penthouse, unaware that their world had just tilted into chaos. He would need to tell her, but not yet. Not until he'd contained the situation enough that she could see her daughter without falling apart. Yoonji was strong. She'd proven that by marrying him 22 years ago, knowing exactly what kind of man he was. But so he was their only child, the one pure thing in their complicated lives. I'll tell her personally. After the meeting, Kang gestured to his men who moved forward with a stretcher. Dr. Kim supervised as they lifted So-hee with careful precision, her quiet whimper of pain driving nails into Jin-woo's composure. "Appa," she called as they began moving her toward the SUVs. He was beside her immediately, his hand finding hers again. "I'm here. Don't." She swallowed hard, her words slurring slightly from the pain medication beginning to take effect. "Don't let this start a war. Promise me." The request was so innocent, so achingly naive, that Jin-woo had to force his expression to remain gentle. His daughter still believed in proportional responses and measured reactions. She didn't understand that in his world, there was no such thing as half measures. You either ruled absolutely or you were consumed. "Rest now," he said instead of promising something he couldn't deliver. "Everything will be handled." They loaded her into the lead SUV, Dr. Kim climbing in beside her. The convoy would take her to the private facility where injuries like hers were treated without awkward questions or police reports. Jin-woo watched the vehicles disappear into Seoul's early morning traffic, then turned his attention to the Mercedes where Jasmine still waited. He approached slowly, each step measured, giving her time to see him coming rather than startling her. He opened the driver's door and slid behind the wheel, filling the car's interior with his presence. Jasmine sat rigid in the passenger seat, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes straight ahead. "You're afraid?" Jin-woo observed. "That's good. It means you're smart." "Am I?" She cleared her throat, tried again. "Am I in danger, Mr. Park?" "That depends entirely on what happens next." He started the Mercedes, pulling out of the alley and into the flow of traffic. "I need you to tell me everything about tonight. From the moment you left wherever you were to the moment you found my daughter. Every detail, no matter how insignificant it seems." Jasmine took a shaky breath, then began talking. She'd been at a bar called Southside in Itaewon, meeting friends from her teaching job at an international school. They'd left around 1:30 a.m. heading their separate ways. She lived in a small apartment on the hill, a 20-minute walk that she made most nights without incident. Around 2:10 a.m. she'd been passing the Hamilton Hotel when she heard sounds from the alley, voices raised, a scuffle, a cry that had made her blood run cold. She'd taken out her phone, ready to call police, when 3 men emerged from the alley running. "They almost knocked me over," she said, her voice distant with memory. "One of them looked right at me. No mask, just his face. He was Korean, maybe 40, with a scar through his eyebrow. He smiled at me, Mr. Park. Like he'd just done something he was proud of." Jin-woo's hands tightened on the wheel. A scar through the eyebrow. He knew at least a dozen men fitting that description, but combined with the cologne evidence and the inside knowledge of So-hee's schedule, the possibilities narrowed considerably. "What did you do then?" "I waited until they were gone, then I went into the alley. Found your daughter. She was trying to get up, but she kept falling. Her phone was in pieces on the ground, but I found her bag, found her wallet, saw her ID. Her emergency contact was listed as father, with your number. And you called me instead of emergency services." Jasmine paused, choosing her words carefully. "I've lived in Seoul for 2 years, Mr. Park. I've heard stories about certain families, certain names that you don't say out loud. When I saw your name on that phone, I knew. I knew the police wouldn't be what she needed." Intelligent indeed. Jasmine had understood instinctively that bringing official authorities into Park Jin-woo's world would complicate everything, potentially putting So-hee in more danger, not less. "You saved my daughter's life," Jin-woo said quietly. "That creates a debt. I don't want. I didn't ask what you want." His voice remained soft, but steel reinforced every word. "In my world, debts are sacred. You saved So-hee. You called me. You stayed with her when you could have run. Those actions have consequences, and in this case, the consequences are protection." He handed her a business card from his jacket pocket. Black, minimalist, with only a phone number embossed in silver. "That number connects directly to my head of security. If anyone approaches you about tonight, if you feel threatened, if you so much as get a strange look from someone on the street, you call that number immediately. Understand?" Jasmine took the card with trembling fingers. "For how long?" "Until I say otherwise." He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Which might be never. You're part of this now, Jasmine, right? You're under my protection, which means you're also under my observation. Don't make me regret extending that courtesy. They drove in silence for several minutes, Seoul flowing past the windows in a blur of neon and concrete. Finally, Jin-woo pulled up outside a modern apartment building in the heart of Itaewon, probably Jasmine's building, though he hadn't asked for the address. She noticed. How did you? I know everything that matters in this city. He shifted the Mercedes into park. Go home. Clean up. Say nothing to anyone about tonight. A man will be stationed outside your building, you won't see him but he'll be there. For your protection. Jasmine reached for the door handle then paused. Mr. Park? I hope your daughter recovers quickly. Something almost like warmth flickered in Jin-woo's eyes. She will. Because of you. He watched her disappear into the building then pulled out his phone. 4 calls to make before the meeting, each one moving pieces across the chessboard of Seoul's underworld. First he called his wife. Yoonji, he said when she answered, her voice thick with sleep. I need you to wake up and listen very carefully. So he is safe but she's been hurt. Phoenix Tower stood 47 stories above Seoul's Gangnam district, its black glass facade reflecting the city like a monument to ambition and control. The top 3 floors belonged to Park Jin-woo, nominally listed as offices for his legitimate import-export business, but everyone who mattered knew the truth. This was where Seoul's underworld came to bend the knee. Jin-woo arrived at 4:15 a.m., the city still caught in that liminal space between night and morning where the desperate and the powerful overlapped. The private elevator carried him to the 45th floor, where the conference room waited like a stage set for betrayal. Kang was already there, along with 2 other men Jin-woo trusted with his life, Lee Jae-sung, his financial mind, and Park Dong-woo, his younger brother and enforcer. Dong-woo looked up as Jin-woo entered, his face a map of barely controlled fury. Unlike Jin-woo, who'd learned to transform emotion into calculation, Dong-woo wore his rage like a second skin. Tell me who, he said without preamble. Tell me who hurt my niece and I'll bring you their heads before sunrise. Patience, Jin-woo said, moving to the head of the conference table. We do this correctly or we don't do it at all. The room's floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Seoul waking up, lights flickering to life in apartment buildings, early traffic beginning to clot the streets below. Somewhere in that sprawl, 3 men were congratulating themselves on surviving the night. They wouldn't survive the week. Kang spread photographs across the table's polished surface, security camera footage from around the Hamilton Hotel, grainy but serviceable. Jin-woo studied each image with the focus of a jeweler examining diamonds for flaws. There. 3 figures emerging from the alley at 2:13 a.m., their faces visible in the ambient light from a nearby convenience store. The lead figure matched Jasmine's description exactly. Korean, approximately 40 years old, scar bisecting his left eyebrow. Name? Jin-woo asked, though he already suspected. Han Jae-bong, Kang confirmed. Muscle for hire, usually works collections and intimidation. He's been on Sungmin's crew for about 8 months. 8 months. Long enough to be trusted with sensitive information, short enough that his loyalty was still being tested. The perfect tool for someone planning deniability. Jin-woo's finger moved to the second man, younger, with a face that belonged to 1,000 interchangeable enforcers. And this one? Cho Min-sik. Small time. Gambling debts. He'd do anything for cash. Which means someone paid him. Jin-woo shifted his attention to the third man, whose face was partially obscured by the angle. Can we enhance this? Lee Jae-sung, who'd been silent until now, leaned forward. His fingers danced across a tablet, manipulating the image until the third man's features resolved into clarity. He was older than the others, maybe 50, with the kind of weathered face that came from decades of violence. That's Baek Sang-woo, Jae-sung said quietly. He's complicated. Explain complicated. Baek is ex-military special forces. He retired 8 years ago and went freelance. High-end security, bodyguard work, occasionally some wet work for clients who can afford his rates. Jae-sung's expression was troubled. He's expensive, young. Whoever hired him paid at least 30 million won, maybe more. 30 million won. Around 25,000 US dollars. Not an insignificant sum for a beating, which meant this wasn't just about sending a message, it was about sending a message with style, with professionalism, with the kind of untraceable expertise that cost real money. Financial records, Jin-woo ordered. For all 3 of them. I want to know who's been paying them, when the money moved and where it came from. Layer by layer, all the way back to the source. Already running the analysis, Jae-sung confirmed. But if they're smart, the money will be washed through enough accounts that it'll take time to trace. Then take the time. Jinwoo's voice was patient, implacable. We have nothing but time now. Dongwoo slammed his palm on the table, making the photographs jump. While we're taking our time, Sungmin is out there, probably planning his next move. We should bring him in now, make him talk. And if we're wrong? Jinwoo cut him off with surgical precision. If Sungmin is innocent and we torture a man who's been loyal for 12 years based on cologne scent and coincidence, what does that do to our organization? What message does that send to the other men? It sends the message that touching your daughter means death. No. Jinwoo's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow filled the room. It sends the message that I'm weak enough to be manipulated into destroying my own infrastructure. That's what this whole thing is designed to do, Dongwoo. Someone wants me to tear apart my organization from the inside while they watch from a safe distance. Understanding flickered across Dongwoo's face, his rage cooling into something more dangerous: calculation. Kang cleared his throat. The other members of the inner circle will be here within the hour. How much do we tell them? It was the right question. Jinwoo's inner circle consisted of 7 men besides himself: Kim Sungmin, Choi Youngjin, who oversaw the legitimate businesses, Yu Taeyong, weapons and supply, Hwang Min-seo, territory management, Nam Ji-suk, political connections, and Park Dong-woo, enforcement. Each man controlled a critical piece of the empire, and each man was theoretically above suspicion. Theoretically. We tell them exactly what happened, Jinwoo decided. No details held back. I want to see their faces when they learn about Sohee. I want to see who's surprised, who's concerned, and who already knows. Sungmin will know something's wrong the moment he walks in, Kang warned. He's been with you too long not to read your moods. Good. Let him worry. Let him wonder if we know. Jinwoo began pacing, his mind working through possibilities like a chess master analyzing an endgame. The meeting serves multiple purposes. First, it brings everyone into one space where we can observe them. Second, it forces the traitor to maintain their mask for an extended period. People make mistakes when they're under pressure. Third, it sends a message to whoever is behind this that Park Jinwoo doesn't panic. Jae-sung looked up from his tablet. I have preliminary financials on Han Jae-bong. 3 days ago he received a wire transfer of 5 million won from an account registered to a shell company in Busan. The company is owned by another shell which is owned by another. Classic money laundering structure. Can you crack it? Eventually. But Hyung. Jae-sung's expression was grim. The sophistication of this setup suggests whoever we're dealing with has serious resources. This isn't street-level planning. This is corporate-level financial engineering, which narrowed the suspect pool considerably. Most of Seoul's criminal enterprises operated on cash and intimidation, not complex financial instruments designed to hide money trails. Whoever had orchestrated Sohee's attack had access to both worlds, the brutal violence of the streets and the elegant complexity of white-collar crime. Jinwoo's phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Kim, patient stable. X-rays show hairline orbital fracture. 3 cracked ribs. Painful but not life-threatening. She's asking for you. Relief washed through him, quickly buried beneath the operational necessities of the moment. So he was alive, would recover, and had given him enough information to begin unraveling this conspiracy. Now he needed to move carefully, precisely, giving nothing away until he understood the full scope of the betrayal. Dongwoo, he said, turning to his brother. I need you to visit someone for me. Who? Park Il-sung. The name made everyone in the room go still. Park Il-sung, no relation despite the shared surname, was Seoul's premier information broker, a man who'd built an empire on knowing everyone's secrets and selling them to the highest bidder. He was neutral by design, serving all sides equally, which made him simultaneously invaluable and dangerous. What are we buying? Dongwoo asked. Everything he knows about unusual movements in the past month. New alliances forming, old grudges being settled, money moving in unexpected directions. Someone planned this attack, which means they've been laying groundwork. Il-sung will have noticed ripples. He'll charge a fortune. Pay it. Jinwoo's voice was flat. And Dongwoo? Make it clear that I'm asking as a courtesy, not a customer. Il-sung stays neutral by understanding which lines not to cross. If he knows something about who hurt my daughter and hasn't volunteered it, he needs to reconsider his position. Dongwoo's smile was a predator's expression. I'll make it very clear. As his brother left, Jinwoo returned his attention to the photographs spread across the table. 3 men. 3 pieces of a larger puzzle. Han Jae-bong with his scar and his connection to Kim Sung-min. Cho Min-sik, desperate and cheap. Baek Sang-woo, expensive and professional. What kind of operation required both street thugs and elite operators? The answer came to him with the clarity of a knife blade. One that needed to look like street violence while being professionally executed. The thugs provided the appearance of random brutality, the kind of attack that could be written off as wrong place, wrong time, bad luck in a dangerous city. But Baek Sang-woo's presence ensured the job was done correctly, efficiently, with just enough restraint that so he would survive to deliver the message. Everyone has a daughter. Someone had put tremendous thought into this attack, balancing brutality with precision, sending multiple messages simultaneously. To Jin-woo himself, we can reach your family. To his organization, your boss's protection isn't absolute. To Seoul's underworld, there's a new player with the resources to challenge Park Jin-woo's empire. Hyung, Kang said, interrupting his thoughts. The first of the inner circle is arriving. Choi Young-jin 10 minutes early as always. Jin-woo checked his watch, 4:52 a.m. The meeting was scheduled for 5 o'clock, which meant Choi's early arrival was either habitual punctuality or anxiety. Either way, it would provide an opportunity for observation. Let him wait in the reception area. When the others arrive, bring them all in together. I want to see the group dynamic. Kang nodded and stepped out, leaving Jin-woo alone with Jae-sung and the photographs of 3 men who'd made the last mistake of their lives. Jae-sung, he said quietly, if you were trying to destabilize my organization, how would you do it? His financial advisor didn't hesitate. This was a conversation they'd had before, always in hypothetical terms, always as a thought exercise in paranoia. I'd attack your legitimacy. Make it look like you can't protect what's yours. Your daughter is perfect for that. High-value target, symbolic importance, and attacking her puts you in an impossible position. How so? If you respond with overwhelming force, you look unstable, willing to burn down Seoul over a family matter. That scares the political connections, worries the legitimate business partners, makes everyone nervous. But if you respond with measured force, you look weak. Unable or unwilling to protect your own blood. That invites challenges from every ambitious lieutenant and rival family. A lose-lose scenario. Unless you find the third option. Jae-sung's eyes met his. Which is what you always do. Jin-woo smiled, but there was no warmth in it. The third option is eliminating everyone involved so thoroughly that it becomes a cautionary tale. Not excessive force. Not measured force. Surgical precision that leaves no doubt about what happens when someone crosses certain lines. Which requires knowing exactly who's involved. Which is why we investigate carefully. Jin-woo gestured to the tablet. Keep digging into those financials. I want to know where everyone came from and where it's going. And Jae-sung? Check our own accounts too. Jae-sung's eyes widened slightly. You think the money might have come from inside? I think a traitor clever enough to orchestrate this might be clever enough to steal from me while doing it. It would explain how they could afford someone like Baek Sang-woo. The door opened again and Kang stepped through with a strange expression on his face. Sir, we have a complication. Explain. Kim Sung-min isn't coming to the meeting. His assistant called 5 minutes ago saying he's dealing with a supply chain issue in Busan, won't be back until tomorrow evening. The room went silent. Jin-woo stood perfectly still, his mind racing through implications. Sung-min's absence could be coincidence. Supply chain issues were common enough in their business. Or it could be something else entirely. When did this Busan situation arise? He asked, his voice dangerously calm. According to his assistant, yesterday afternoon. Around 3 p.m. Before the attack on Sohee. Which meant either Sung-min had legitimate business and the timing was coincidence, or he'd created an alibi knowing what was coming. Get me security footage from Busan, Jin-woo ordered. Hotels, restaurants, anywhere he might be. I want confirmation he's actually there and not hiding somewhere in Seoul. Already on it, Kang confirmed. But sir, if he is in Busan, if he really is dealing with business, then we'll know soon enough. Jin-woo moved toward the windows, looking out over Seoul as dawn began painting the eastern sky in shades of amber and rose. For now we proceed as planned. The others will be here soon, and I want answers from every single one of them. Behind him, Jae-sung returned to his financial analysis, fingers flying over the tablet as he chased money trails through the labyrinth of Seoul's economy. Kang made calls, mobilizing resources, gathering information with the efficiency of a man who'd spent 20 years learning how Park Jin-woo's mind worked. And Jin-woo stood at the window, watching his city wake up, calculating the precise amount of violence required to restore order without inviting chaos. The game was in motion now. All that remained was seeing who would be left standing when it ended. Jinwoo's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. He answered without speaking. Heavy breathing on the other end, then a voice distorted by electronic modification. Did you get our message, Mr. Park? Everyone has a daughter. Even you. Click. The line went dead. Jinwoo lowered the phone slowly, his expression unchanged, but Kang saw the microscopic tightening around his eyes, the only sign that someone had just signed their own death warrant. The conference room filled over the next 8 minutes with the careful choreography of men who understood hierarchy. Choi Young-jin entered first, his silver hair immaculate despite the early hour, his suit expensive enough to belong to any legitimate CEO. He'd been Jinwoo's connection to Seoul's legitimate business world for 18 years, laundering money through a network of restaurants, real estate ventures and import-export businesses. Yoo Taeyong came next, younger at 39, built like a boxer, with hands that had personally tested every weapon that passed through their arsenal. He greeted Jinwoo with a slight bow, his eyes already scanning the room for threats, force of habit from his military days. Hwang Min-seo arrived precisely at 5 a.m., because he was the kind of man who viewed punctuality as a competitive sport. He managed their territorial holdings across Seoul, collecting protection fees, resolving disputes, ensuring that every nightclub, bar and gambling den in their sphere of influence understood exactly who they answered to. Nam Jae-suk was last, fashionably 2 minutes late, his politician's smile already in place. He was their bridge to Seoul's official power structure. The councilmen who looked the other way, the prosecutors who lost evidence, the police captains who developed sudden amnesia about certain activities. With Kim Sung-min absent, 5 of the 7 inner circle members were present. Jinwoo let them settle into their usual seats, noting who sat where, who made eye contact, who seemed nervous. Gentlemen, he began, his voice carrying the weight of announcement rather than conversation. Thank you for coming on short notice. I know you were told this was about the Russian situation, but I lied. The room's energy shifted immediately, tension coiling around the table like invisible wire. 3 hours ago, Jinwoo continued, his tone utterly flat, 3 men attacked my daughter in an alley in 81. They beat her severely enough to fracture her orbital bone and 3 ribs. She is currently in our private medical facility, conscious but in considerable pain. The reactions were instantaneous and varied. Choi Young-jin went white, one hand coming up to his mouth in genuine shock. Oh God. So is she? She'll recover, Jinwoo cut him off, watching every face at the table. But that's not the relevant question. The relevant question is who ordered the attack and why. Yoo Taeyong's face had transformed into a mask of cold fury, his military training asserting itself. Do we have names? Locations? Just give me the word Hyung and they're dead by noon. Hwang Min-seo was leaning forward, his territory manager's mind already working through implications. An attack on Sohee is an attack on all of us. Whoever did this is declaring war. Nam Jae-suk, the politician, was quieter, his expression thoughtful. This will have political implications. If news of this spreads, the prosecutors I've been managing will come under pressure to act. We'll need to control the narrative carefully. All reasonable reactions. All exactly what Jinwoo would expect from men loyal to him and horrified by violence against his daughter. But one of them might be performing. We have names, he said, gesturing to Kang, who distributed copies of the enhanced security camera photographs. Han Jae-bong, Cho Min-sik and Baek Sang-woo. Han works, or worked, for Sung-min's crew. The others are freelance. Someone paid them approximately 35 million won to put my daughter in the hospital. He watched carefully as each man examined the photographs. Choi frowned, clearly not recognizing any of the faces. Yu's jaw clenched, his anger deepening. Hwang studied the images with the careful attention of a man mentally cataloging information. Nam's politician's mask never slipped, but his eyes lingered on Baek Sang-woo's face just a fraction longer than necessary. Interesting. I recognize Han, Hwang said finally. He's collected for us in Gangnam. Reliable but not particularly bright. He's muscle, not a planner. Baek Sang-woo is known to me as well, Nam added, his voice careful. He's done security work for some of the politicians in my network. Very professional, very expensive. If he was involved, this wasn't a simple street attack. No, Jinwoo agreed. It wasn't. They knew Sohee's schedule, knew she'd be walking home from the library, knew exactly where to wait. This was planned by someone with inside information. The implications hung in the air like poison gas. Choi spoke first, his voice shaking slightly. You think it was one of us? I think it was someone with access to information only we would have. Jinwoo's gaze moved around the table, meeting each man's eyes in turn. Sohee's security detail was light because she was in a safe neighborhood, doing routine activities. The only people who knew her precise schedule were family, her driver, and anyone he might have reported to. Young Soo Choi, Kong supplied. Junior driver, assigned to Sohee 3 months ago on Sungmin's recommendation. Every eye in the room shifted toward the empty chair where Kim Sungmin should have been sitting. Where is Sungmin? You asked, his voice hard. Busan. Allegedly dealing with a supply chain issue that arose yesterday afternoon. Jinwoo's tone made it clear how much credence he gave to this excuse. He sent his regrets. Convenient timing, Hwang muttered. Very convenient, Jinwoo agreed. Which is why we're going to discuss this without him. I want honest assessments from each of you. Who benefits from attacking my daughter? Who has the resources to hire someone like Baek Sangwoo? Who would be bold enough, or desperate enough, to strike at my family? Nam leaned back in his chair, his politician's mind working through angles. The obvious answer is someone trying to weaken your position. Make you look vulnerable, invite challenges from rival organizations. But the timing is strange. How so? We're at peace right now. The Russians are contained, the Chinese are focused on their own internal struggles. The Japanese families haven't made a move in years. This is the most stable our territory has been since the war with the Sang-Yongpa 5 years ago. Nam's fingers drummed on the table. Attacking you now when things are quiet doesn't make strategic sense unless... Unless what? Unless someone is trying to create instability specifically because things are too stable. If you're planning a move against an entrenched power, you need chaos to cover your advance. It was a sophisticated analysis, exactly the kind of thinking Jinwoo paid Nam to provide. It was also, potentially, the kind of misdirection a traitor might offer, pointing suspicion outward when the real threat came from within. Jae-sung, Jinwoo said, turning to his financial advisor. Speak. Jae-sung had been quiet during the exchange, his tablet resting on the table in front of him. Now he activated it, projecting financial data onto the conference room's main screen. I've been tracking unusual financial movements over the past 6 months, he began, his voice clinical. Nothing dramatic, nothing that triggered immediate alarms, but in aggregate there's a pattern. Small amounts of money, a few million won here and there, disappearing from our accounts through what look like legitimate business expenses. A restaurant renovation that cost 10% more than it should have. A weapons shipment where the inventory doesn't quite match the invoice. Office supplies that seem excessive. How much in total? Jinwoo asked. Approximately 200 million won. The number made everyone at the table shift uncomfortably. 200 million won, roughly $160,000, was enough to fund a serious operation, enough to hire professionals, enough to buy loyalty or manufacture betrayal. Who has access to these accounts? Choi asked, though his face suggested he already knew the answer. All of us, Jae-sung confirmed. Anyone at this table could have authorized those expenditures. The paper trail is clean enough that it wouldn't raise immediate flags, dirty enough that someone determined could trace it with enough time. Hwang slammed his palm on the table. So one of us has been stealing from the organization to fund an attack on Sohee? That's what you're saying. I'm saying the money exists, Jae-sung replied carefully. Where it went and who authorized it is still being investigated. Jinwoo watched the dynamics playing out around the table, anger, suspicion, fear. Good. He wanted them uncomfortable, wanted them looking at each other with fresh eyes, reconsidering loyalties they'd taken for granted. Here's what's going to happen, he said, his voice cutting through the rising tension like a blade. Each of you will submit to a complete financial audit. Every account, every transaction, every expenditure for the past year. Jae-sung will conduct the review personally, and anyone who refuses or attempts to hide anything will be considered complicit. That's... Choi started, then stopped himself. That's reasonable. I have nothing to hide. Neither do I, you added immediately. Hwang and Nam both nodded their agreement, though Nam's expression had gone carefully neutral, the face of a man calculating odds. Additionally, Jinwoo continued, I want each of you to provide your whereabouts for the past 72 hours. Where you were, who you were with, what you were doing. Supporting evidence where possible, credit card receipts, security camera footage, witness statements. You're treating us like suspects, Hwang said, but there was more resignation than anger in his voice. I'm treating you like members of an organization that's been infiltrated, Jinwoo corrected. The traitor, or traitors, could be at this table or they could be elsewhere in our structure. But until I know for certain, everyone is a suspect. Including me. That last part made several of them blink in surprise. Jae-sung, Jin-woo said, add my accounts to the audit. I want it on record that I'm subject to the same scrutiny as everyone else. It was a calculated move, demonstrating fairness while also reinforcing his position. A guilty man wouldn't invite investigation into his own finances. An innocent man confident in his authority could afford the gesture. Kang's phone buzzed and he excused himself to take the call. When he returned 30 seconds later, his expression was carefully controlled, which meant he had significant information. Sir, we have confirmation on Sungmin's location. Hotel security footage from Busan shows him checking in yesterday at 4:47 p.m. He's been in his room or at meetings since then, multiple witnesses. The room's energy shifted again. If Sungmin was legitimately in Busan, it complicated the theory that he was directly involved in Sohee's attack. Not impossible, he could have ordered it remotely, but it suggested a more complex conspiracy than a single betrayer acting alone. Get me a list of everyone he's met with in Busan, Jin-woo ordered. Names, business affiliations, reasons for the meetings. I want to know if his supply chain issue is legitimate or theater. Dong-woo chose that moment to return, slipping into the conference room with the satisfied expression of a man who'd gotten what he wanted. He nodded to Jin-woo, a signal that his conversation with Park Il-sung had been productive. Gentlemen, Jin-woo said, rising from his chair. You have your assignments. Financial audits, timeline documentation, and most importantly, absolute silence about what we've discussed here. If word leaks that we're investigating our own organization, it will be seen as weakness. Clear? A chorus of agreement followed him as he moved toward the door, Dong-woo and Kang falling into step beside him. They walked in silence until they reached Jin-woo's private office, a space dominated by floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture that suggested power through absence rather than presence. Il-sung had information, Dong-woo said as soon as the door closed. Interesting information. Tell me. 2 months ago, someone put out quiet inquiries about your family's routines. Not obvious questions, nothing that would trigger alarm, but Il-sung picks up on patterns. Someone wanted to know where Sohee went to school, what her schedule was like, who her friends were. Did Il-sung provide this information? Dong-woo shook his head. He declined, claimed ignorance. But he remembered the inquirer, a woman, Chinese accent, paid in cryptocurrency. She was asking about several prominent families, not just ours, so it seemed like market research rather than targeted intelligence gathering. But now in context. In context, it looks like someone was building a targeting package. Dong-woo's expression was grim. Il-sung also mentioned something else. 3 weeks ago there was a meeting in Busan. Very quiet, very exclusive. Representatives from several organizations that normally don't do business together. Which organizations? The Busan Chilsungpa, the Daegu Samhyunpa, and someone from the Chinese triads. Dong-woo paused. And someone from Seoul, but Il-sung didn't know who. His source only caught fragments, something about a new arrangement, and changing the balance of power. Jin-woo moved to the windows, his mind assembling pieces into a larger picture. A meeting in Busan, 3 weeks before the attack. Chinese involvement, which explained the woman asking questions. Multiple organizations, which suggested a coalition rather than a single actor. And someone from Seoul sitting at that table, representing either themselves or Park Jin-woo's organization. Sungmin is in Busan right now, he said quietly. I know. Dong-woo's voice was heavy with implication. But we have footage of him arriving yesterday, which means he couldn't have been at a meeting 3 weeks ago without us knowing he was gone. Unless someone else attended that meeting in his name. Kang had been silent until now, but his strategic mind was following the same threads as Jin-woo's. Or unless there's more than one traitor, and Sungmin is being set up to take the fall. The possibility hung in the air, complex and troubling. If Sungmin was innocent but being framed, it meant the real traitor was sophisticated enough to use one of Jin-woo's most trusted men as a shield. If Sungmin was guilty but had created an alibi for the Busan meeting, it meant his betrayal went deeper and further back than the attack on Sohee. Either way, the conspiracy was more extensive than a simple act of violence. I need to see Sungmin's phone records, Jin-woo decided. Not just calls but location data. I want to know everywhere he's been for the past month, every call he's made, every text he's sent. Legal or not, I need that information. I can have it in 6 hours, Kang said. Make it 3. Jin-woo turned from the window, his expression carved from stone. And Kang? Activate our asset inside the Busan Chilsungpa. I want to know what that meeting 3 weeks ago was about, who attended and what deals were made. That asset is deep cover. Using them could compromise years of intelligence work. Then compromise it. Jinwoo's voice was flat, absolute. Someone attacked my daughter. I'll burn down every intelligence network in Korea if that's what it takes to find them. Kang bowed slightly and left to execute his orders, leaving Jinwoo alone with his brother. Dongwoo moved to the office's bar, pouring 2 glasses of Japanese whiskey without asking if Jinwoo wanted one. He handed one glass to his brother and kept the other, both men standing at the windows as Seoul continued waking up below them. How's Yoonji handling this? Dongwoo asked quietly. She's with Sohee now. Stronger than I expected, but then she's always been stronger than people realize. Jinwoo took a careful sip of whiskey, letting the burn ground him. She wants blood. She's not the only one. No. Jinwoo's reflection in the window was ghost-like, merging with the city behind the glass. But blood has to be precise. Surgical. If we simply start killing everyone who might be involved, we'll trigger the war whoever planned this is hoping for. And if we don't kill anyone? Then we look weak and 50 ambitious lieutenants will start wondering if Park Jinwoo has lost his edge. Jinwoo set his glass down with careful precision. So we find everyone involved and we kill them in a way that makes it clear this was justice, not random violence. We document the betrayal, make it public to the right people, and demonstrate that Park Jinwoo's mercy has limits. Dongwoo smiled, and it was the expression of a man who'd grown up learning that family loyalty was measured in bodies. I've missed this. The quiet before the killing starts. Don't miss it too much. Jinwoo's voice was dry. We're not barbarians anymore, Dongwoo. We're businessmen who occasionally have to remind people about contract enforcement. Businessmen who collect debts in blood. Every currency has its place. They stood in silence for a moment, 2 brothers who'd built an empire on the graves of men who'd underestimated them. Then Dongwoo's phone buzzed, and his expression shifted from dark amusement to focused attention. One of our street contacts just reported seeing Han Jae-bong, he said, reading the message. The one with the scar. He's at a gambling den in Yangdongpo, acting like he doesn't have a care in the world. Interesting. Jinwoo's mind was already working through options. He's either phenomenally stupid or he thinks he's protected. Either way, he has information we need. I can have a team there in 20 minutes. No teams. Not yet. Jinwoo turned from the window, his expression thoughtful. Have him watched but not approached. I want to see who he talks to, where he goes, whether anyone is protecting him. If he's confident enough to show his face in public, it's because he believes he's safe. I want to know why he believes that. And if he runs? Then we'll know someone tipped him off, which tells us the leak in our organization is still active. Jinwoo moved to his desk, opening his laptop to access the secure network that connected all of his operations. Put a tracker on him, something he won't notice. I want to know every step he takes, every person he meets, every word he says. As Dongwoo left to arrange surveillance, Jinwoo pulled up the security camera footage from the Hamilton Hotel attack again, watching it frame by frame. 3 men emerge from an alley, moving with the casual confidence of professionals who just completed a job. Han Jae-bong in the lead, scar visible even in the grainy footage. Cho Min-sik behind him, nervous, glancing back at the alley. And Baek Sang-woo bringing up the rear, his movements controlled, precise, a man who'd done this kind of work 100 times before. But there was something else in the footage, something Jinwoo had missed on first viewing. Just before they disappeared from frame, Baek Sang-woo's hand went to his ear, adjusting an earpiece that wouldn't be visible to a casual observer. He'd been receiving instructions. Real-time guidance from someone watching remotely. Which meant someone had been monitoring the attack, possibly recording it, definitely controlling it from a safe distance. Jinwoo isolated the frame, enhanced it as much as the software would allow, and confirmed the presence of the communication device. Then he began working backward through the footage, looking for anyone else in the area who might have been observing, who might have had line of sight to the alley. There. 40 meters from the alley entrance, a parked car with someone in the driver's seat. The angle was wrong to see their face, but the car's headlights were off while the engine was running, visible by the exhaust vapor in the cool night air. They'd been waiting. Watching. Jinwoo zoomed in on the license plate, ran it through his network's database, and felt something cold settle into his chest. The car was registered to a shell company owned by one of Choi Young-jin's legitimate businesses. His financial manager, the man who'd looked genuinely shocked at the news of Sohee's attack, owned the car that had been used for surveillance during that attack. It didn't prove Choi was involved. The car could have been stolen, borrowed, or used without his knowledge. But combined with the missing money that Jae-sung had identified, combined with Choi's access to So-hee's schedule through his connection to the family's legitimate operations, it created a pattern. Jin-woo sat back in his chair, his mind racing through implications. If Choi was involved, it meant the betrayal ran deeper than he'd imagined. Choi wasn't just part of the inner circle. He was the financial foundation of the entire legitimate side of Jin-woo's empire. Restaurants, real estate, import-export businesses, all of it flowed through Choi's carefully managed networks. Arresting him, killing him, even investigating him openly could trigger a collapse of the legitimate operations that provided cover for everything else. But letting him continue if he was indeed guilty, meant leaving a traitor with access to hundreds of millions of won and connections to everyone who mattered in Seoul's business community. The door opened and Jae-sung entered without knocking, the privilege of someone who'd earned absolute trust over 18 years of loyal service. "I have preliminary results from the financial audit," he said, placing his tablet on Jin-woo's desk. "You're not going to like them." "Show me." Jae-sung pulled up a series of documents, each one highlighting a transaction that shouldn't have happened or an expense that didn't quite match reality. The missing 200 million won comes from 47 different transactions over 6 months. Each one was authorized by different people, which suggests someone with master access to our financial systems was deliberately spreading the theft to avoid detection. Who has master access? You, me, and Choi Young-jin. Of course. Jin-woo had already suspected, but having it confirmed felt like a door closing on possibility, locking him into a path he'd hoped to avoid. "There's more," Jae-sung continued, his expression troubled. "I found something while digging into Choi's personal accounts. 3 months ago he took out a loan from a bank in Tokyo. 50 million yen, about 400 million won. The loan was secured against property he supposedly owned in Japan. Property I didn't know about. Property that doesn't exist," Jae-sung confirmed. The documents were forgeries, good ones, but forgeries nonetheless. The Tokyo bank realized it about 2 weeks ago and has been trying to contact Choi for repayment. Gambling debts. Jin-woo suggested, though his tone made it clear he didn't believe his own question. If so, he's hidden them well. But more likely. Jae-sung trailed off, reluctant to voice the conclusion they were both reaching. More likely he needed capital for something he couldn't fund through legitimate channels, Jin-woo finished. Something large enough that even stealing from our organization wasn't sufficient. What costs more than 200 million won and requires external financing? Jin-woo stood, moving back to the windows where Seoul sprawled beneath him like a kingdom made of glass and steel. "Ako. You don't overthrow Park Jin-woo cheaply. You need money for bribes, for hired muscle, for safe houses and weapons and a dozen other things. Even then it's probably not enough. Unless you have partners," Jae-sung said quietly. "Other organizations willing to contribute resources in exchange for a piece of whatever comes after." It was the answer Jin-woo had been circling around since Dong-woo mentioned the Busan meeting. This wasn't one trader acting alone out of greed or ambition. This was a coordinated effort involving multiple organizations, multiple players, all betting that Park Jin-woo could be toppled if they struck at the right moment in the right way. And they'd started by attacking his daughter, calculating that either his response would be excessive, making him look unstable, or insufficient, making him look weak. They'd miscalculated. "Jae-sung," Jin-woo said, his voice perfectly calm, perfectly controlled, "I want you to do something that's going to feel wrong." "Sir?" "I want you to continue the audit, but I want you to leak information. Carefully, precisely, through channels that will make it back to Choi. Let him know we're looking at financials, that we're finding discrepancies, that we're getting close. You want to spook him. I want him to make a move." Jin-woo's reflection in the window was merging with his city as dawn finally broke fully over Seoul. Right now he thinks he's safe. He gave us a good performance at the meeting, shock, concern, all the right emotions. But if he knows we're closing in, he'll have to contact his partners, warn them, adjust plans. And when he does that, we follow the trail to everyone involved. Exactly. Jin-woo turned from the window, his expression carved from stone and absolute certainty. Burn down the whole tree, Jae-sung. Not just the branches we can see. The sun rose over Seoul like a judgment, turning the city's glass towers into pillars of fire. Jin-woo stood in his office, watching the transformation, while pieces of conspiracy clicked into place with the inevitability of a gun being loaded. His phone vibrated. "Dr. Kim." "So he is asking for you," the doctor said without preamble. "She's stable, sedated for the pain, but lucid. She has more to tell you," she says. "Things she remembered. I'm coming now." The drive to the private medical facility in Gangnam took 18 minutes through morning traffic. Jin-woo used the time to review everything he knew, organizing facts into patterns, patterns into conclusions, conclusions into action. Choi Young-jin's car at the attack scene. The missing 200 million won from accounts Choi had access to. The forged loan from Tokyo. The meeting in Busan 3 weeks ago that involved Chinese triads and other organizations. Kim Sung-min's convenient absence, though footage placed him in Busan. Han Jae-bong walking freely through Seoul like a man under protection. Each fact alone was circumstantial. Together, they painted a picture of coordinated betrayal operating on multiple levels. The medical facility was an unremarkable building tucked between a cosmetic surgery clinic and a corporate office, deliberately anonymous, designed to treat injuries that couldn't be explained in regular hospitals. Jin-woo's people had used it for everything from gunshot wounds to drug overdoses, always with absolute discretion. Dr. Kim met him at the entrance, leading him through corridors that smelled of antiseptic and secrets. She's in the executive suite on the 3rd floor. Your wife is with her. Sohee's room was private, windowless, secure. Yoonji sat beside the bed holding their daughter's hand, her face showing every one of her 43 years. She'd been beautiful once, still was, in the way that grief and survival carve beauty into something harder, more enduring. Now she looked up at Jin-woo with eyes that demanded blood. He'd give it to her. Appa. Sohee's voice was thick from pain medication, but stronger than it had been in the alley. Her face was a map of violence, swollen, discolored, bandaged, but her one working eye tracked him clearly. I remembered something. Jin-woo pulled a chair close to the bed, his hand finding hers. Gentle. Careful. Tell me. The one who grabbed me first. I didn't just smell his cologne. I heard his voice. Sohee's words came slowly, each one clearly costing effort. Just for a second before they put something over my face. He said, nothing personal, princess. Just business. In Korean? Yes, but... She paused, gathering her thoughts through the fog of medication. His accent. It wasn't Seoul. Was Busan maybe? Or Taegyo. Southern definitely. Southern accent. Which matched with Dongwoo's intelligence about the meeting in Busan involving organizations from that region. The man who'd grabbed Sohee wasn't local talent. He was someone brought in from outside Seoul, someone who didn't have connections that might make him hesitate about attacking Park Jin-woo's daughter. What else? Jin-woo asked, his voice patient despite the urgency screaming through his veins. The one giving orders through the earpiece. Sohee's eye closed, remembering. I heard it, Appa. Just for a moment when the one with the scar got too close. A voice in his ear saying, clean work. Make sure she sees the family she's bleeding for. And then the voice laughed. Man or woman? Man older, I think. Smoker's voice rough. She opened her eye again, and it was full of tears and fury. He enjoyed it, Appa. Whoever was watching, whoever was giving orders, they enjoyed hurting me. Yoonji made a sound low in her throat, and Jin-woo saw his wife's hand tighten around Sohee's with enough force to be painful. But his daughter didn't flinch. She had her mother's strength, inherited through blood and example. One more question, Jin-woo said quietly. The cologne you recognized. You said it was the same as Uncle Sung-min's. But could it have been someone else's? Someone else you know who wears expensive cologne. So he thought about it, really thought, her functioning eye distant with concentration. Uncle Choi, she said finally. Mr. Choi Young-jin. He wears the same brand. I remember because Mother commented once that they must shop at the same store. The final piece. Jin-woo stood, leaned down, and kissed his daughter's forehead with infinite gentleness. Rest now. Everything is being handled. Don't let this start a war, she repeated her earlier plea, but weaker now, the medication pulling her towards sleep. There won't be a war, he promised because it was true. Wars required two sides with comparable power. What Jin-woo was planning was execution, not conflict. Outside the room, Yoonji followed him into the hallway, closing the door carefully behind her. When she spoke, her voice was diamond-hard with controlled rage. Choi Young-jin. You're certain? Not yet. But close. Jin-woo met his wife's eyes, seeing himself reflected there, the same cold calculation, the same absolute commitment to family above everything else. If it's him, it's complicated. He's woven into everything legitimate we've built. Removing him could damage years of work. I don't care. Yoonji's voice was perfectly calm, which made it more terrifying than any scream. He hurt our daughter. He watched men beat our baby girl and he laughed. I want him dead, Jin-woo. I want everyone involved dead and I want it to hurt. It will, he promised. But first I need to make sure we get everyone. If we take Choi too early his partners might scatter. I need them all in one place, all confident, all vulnerable. How long? 2 days. Maybe 3. Yoonji nodded once, accepting his judgment because 22 years of marriage had taught her that Park Jin-woo's patience was as deadly as any bullet. I'll stay with Sohee. But Jin-woo? When it's done. I want to watch. He understood. She needed to see it, needed to know that the men who'd hurt their daughter had paid with everything they had. It wasn't revenge. Revenge was emotional, sloppy, satisfying but temporary. This was justice, cold and eternal. You'll watch, he agreed. Mini cliffhanger. As Jin-woo walked to his car, his phone buzzed with an incoming message. No number. Just a photograph of his penthouse building taken from across the street, timestamp showing it had been captured 15 minutes ago. Below it, a single line of text. Nice view from up here. I wonder what it looks like from the inside. Someone was watching. Someone was threatening. And someone had just made their last mistake. Jin-woo returned to Phoenix Tower to find organized chaos. Kong had mobilized their intelligence network, every resource bent toward finding answers. The conference room had been transformed into an operations center, walls covered with photographs, timelines, financial documents connected by lines of red string like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. Except this conspiracy was real. Dong-woo looked up as Jin-woo entered, his face carrying the satisfied expression of a hunter with prey in sight. We have movement. Han Jae-bong left the gambling den 30 minutes ago, went to an apartment building in Mapogu. He's been inside for 23 minutes. Whose apartment? Officially? It's rented to a shell company. But our surveillance shows Cho Min-sik, the second attacker, entering the same building 40 minutes ago. They're together. 2 of the 3 men who'd beaten Sohee, meeting in a safe house that should have been secure. Which meant they felt safe enough to congregate, which meant they believed their protection was absolute. The third one? Baek Sang-woo? Still tracking him, Kong replied. But we have something better. Jae-sung's financial probe triggered a response. Jae-sung himself emerged from behind a wall of documents, his eyes red-rimmed from hours without sleep but bright with predatory focus. Choi made a call 30 minutes after I leaked information about the audit. Encrypted, but we have the call logs. The receiving number traces to a disposable phone purchased in Busan 2 weeks ago. And 3 minutes after that call ended, Kim Sung-min's personal phone received a message from a different encrypted number. We can't read the content, but the timing is suspicious. Jin-woo moved to the center of the room, studying the web of connections spreading across the walls. They're coordinating. Choi calls Busan, someone in Busan contacts Sung-min. He paused. What has Sung-min done since receiving that message? Nothing obvious, Kong said. He attended a legitimate business meeting, had lunch at his hotel, returned to his room. But his phone's location data shows something interesting. It was turned off for 47 minutes this afternoon. How long does it take to drive from central Busan to the industrial district? Kong consulted his tablet. About 40 minutes. So Sung-min turned off his phone, drove somewhere he didn't want tracked, stayed for 47 minutes, then returned. Meeting someone he couldn't risk electronic records with. Jin-woo's mind was racing ahead, seeing the architecture of conspiracy becoming clear. He's not the mastermind. He's a lieutenant. Someone else is running this operation and they're in Busan. The Chilsungpa? Dong-woo suggested. They've wanted a piece of Seoul for years. Maybe. Or someone using the Chilsungpa as cover. Jin-woo turned to face his team. Here's what we know. Choi has been stealing from us and taking out fraudulent loans. He's positioned at the center of our legitimate operations, which gives him access to information about families, schedules, vulnerabilities. Sung-min has connections to Busan and recommended the driver who would have known Sohee's routines. Together, they have the resources to hire professional muscle and the knowledge to target my daughter precisely. But who's the third party? Jae-sung asked. The one calling shots from Busan? Because the sophistication of this operation suggests someone with serious organizational experience. Jin-woo moved to the window, looking out over his city while his mind assembled the final pieces. Jae-sung, pull up business connections between Choi's legitimate companies and any Busan-based organizations. It took 3 minutes of database queries. When the results appeared on the main screen, Jin-woo felt the last puzzle piece click into place. 7 months ago, one of Choi's restaurant chains had entered into a partnership with a Busan-based food distribution company called Daehan Foods. The deal had seemed routine at the time, expanding supply chains, reducing costs, the kind of legitimate business that made their operations sustainable. But Daehan Foods was owned by a holding company which was owned by another holding company which, when you peeled back enough layers, was controlled by a man named Park Chung-ho. The name made everyone in the room go still. Park Chung-ho. No relation to Jin-woo despite the shared surname. But very much a part of Seoul's underworld history. 25 years ago he and Jin-woo had been rivals, both young and ambitious, both carving out territory in a city that seemed too small for them both. They'd gone to war, a brutal 6-month conflict that left bodies scattered across Seoul and Busan. Jin-woo had won, forcing Chung-ho into retreat, into exile in Busan where he'd spent 2 decades building a smaller but still profitable empire. And apparently 2 decades nursing a grudge. Chung-ho, Jin-woo said quietly, the name tasting like old blood in his mouth. He's been planning this for years. The business partnership with Choi gave him access to our financial operations. The meetings in Busan were about building a coalition. The Chilsungpa, the Triads, everyone who's ever wanted a piece of Seoul but been too afraid to move against me. And Choi and Sungmin? Dongwoo asked. Recruited. Bought. Probably promised positions of power in whatever new structure emerges after I'm removed. Jin-woo's voice was flat, emotionless, the way it always got before extreme violence. Chung-ho understood he couldn't beat me directly, so he decided to hollow me out from the inside. Turn my own people against me, make me look weak by failing to protect my family, then move in during the chaos. It's a solid plan, Kang admitted. If you'd responded to Sohee's attack with overwhelming force, you'd have looked unstable. If you'd responded with measured force, you'd have looked weak. Either way, your authority is undermined, your organization questions your judgment, and suddenly a coalition attack becomes viable. Except he miscalculated, Jin-woo said, turning from the window with eyes gone flat and dead. He forgot that I don't respond to provocations the way normal men do. I respond by dismantling everything connected to the threat, piece by piece, until nothing remains but a cautionary tale. Jae-sung was already working on his tablet, fingers flying across the screen. If we're going after a coalition, we need leverage. Chung-ho has built his empire on legitimate businesses and political connections in Busan. Taking him down will require more than violence, it'll require destroying his infrastructure. Then destroy it, Jin-woo said simply. I want every business he owns investigated for tax fraud, labor violations, health code breaches, anything that brings official scrutiny. I want his political protections exposed, bribes, kickbacks, all of it. And I want it done quietly so he doesn't know we're coming until it's too late to run. That will take time, Jae-sung warned. We have time. Because while we're building that case, I'm going to give Chung-ho exactly what he wants. Jin-woo's smile was predatory, terrible. He wants me to look unstable? Fine. I'll look unstable. I'll arrest Sungmin publicly, accuse him of betrayal, make it look like I'm falling apart from paranoia. Chung-ho will think his plan is working, that I'm destroying my own organization out of fear and rage. And while he's celebrating? Dongwoo asked, already smiling because he knew his brother's mind. While he's celebrating, we'll be surrounding him. Legal pressure from above, street pressure from below, financial audits, criminal investigations, every mechanism of power focused on one man until he has nowhere to run. Jin-woo moved back to the center of the room, addressing his team with the calm authority of a general planning a siege. Kang, I want Sungmin brought in tonight. Make it public, make it dramatic. Arrest him at his hotel in Busan, let every criminal in Korea know that Park Jin-woo has turned on one of his oldest friends. And if he resists? He won't. He's too smart for that and he'll be curious about what we know. Jin-woo paused. Have Choi brought in at the same time. Separately, different locations, no opportunity for them to coordinate stories. I want them both isolated, both frightened, both wondering who betrayed who. You're going to turn them, Jae-sung realized. I'm going to offer them a choice, Jin-woo corrected. Testify against Chung-ho and the Busan coalition, give me everything I need to dismantle the conspiracy and die quickly. Or stay silent and die slowly. Very, very slowly. They'll talk, Kang predicted. Everyone talks eventually, Jin-woo agreed. But the speed with which they talk will tell me how deeply the rot goes. If Choi breaks immediately, he's a follower recruited by someone else. If he holds out, he's a true believer in whatever Chung-ho promised him. Dongwoo was pacing now, energy barely contained. And the 3 men who actually touched Sohee? Han, Cho and Baek. We take them tonight. Simultaneously with the arrests of Choi and Sungmin, so no one has warning. Jinwoo's voice dropped to something ancient and implacable. They die, Dongwoo. Not quickly. Not cleanly. They die in a way that makes it clear what happens when someone touches my family. Where? Jinwoo thought about it, considering locations, symbolism, the message he wanted to send. The old factory in Incheon. The one we used during the Russian War. It's isolated, soundproof, and everyone in our world knows what happens there. Public execution? Private but documented. I want every member of our organization to see what I did to the men who hurt Sohee. I want it burned into their memory so deeply that the thought of betraying me becomes physically impossible. It was brutal calculus, the mathematics of fear and loyalty. Jinwoo had built his empire on being fair, being measured, being rational. But fairness had limits, and those limits were drawn in his daughter's blood. Now he would demonstrate that crossing those limits meant death, not as punishment but as natural law, inevitable, inescapable, absolute. Kang was making calls, mobilizing teams. Dongwoo was checking weapons, preparing for the night's work. Jae-sung was building legal cases, assembling documentation that would destroy Changho's empire from within. And Jinwoo stood at the center of it all, orchestrating destruction with the calm precision of a conductor leading a symphony. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He considered ignoring it, then answered. Mr. Park. The voice was electronically distorted, but Jinwoo could hear the smile underneath it. I hope you received my photograph. I wanted you to understand you're not safe. Your family isn't safe. No one you love is beyond our reach. Park Chang-ho, Jinwoo said calmly, not bothering to hide that he knew. 25 years is a long time to nurse a grudge. The pause on the other end was satisfying, the sound of a plan disrupted by unexpected knowledge. You always were clever, Chang-ho finally replied, dropping the electronic distortion. His voice was older now, worn by decades of cigarettes and rage. Too clever to let your daughter walk home alone, I thought. But apparently even you make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes, Jinwoo agreed. For example, you made several. You recruited my people, you built your coalition, you orchestrated an attack designed to make me look weak or unstable. But you forgot something important. What's that? I'm Park Jinwoo. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of 23 years of absolute dominance. I don't panic. I don't make emotional decisions. And I never ever leave debts unpaid. Big words for a man who couldn't protect his own daughter. She's alive. The men you hired aren't going to be, but she's alive, recovering, and already giving me information that's leading me to everyone involved in your little coalition. By tomorrow night you'll be watching your empire burn. By the end of the week you'll be begging me to let you die. Chang-ho laughed, but it sounded forced. You think you can touch me in Busan? I'm protected, Jinwoo. I have the Chilsungpa, I have Chinese connections, I have half your organization already working for me. You have 2 traitors who are about to be arrested, a coalition built on greed that will evaporate the moment they realize I'm coming for them all, and about 60 hours before I arrive in Busan personally. Jinwoo's voice was perfectly calm. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to take apart everything you've built, piece by piece. Your businesses will be shut down by inspectors. Your political protection will evaporate when I expose every bribe you've ever paid. Your soldiers will defect when they realize dying for you isn't worth the payment. And when you have nothing left, no money, no power, no friends, I'll come for you personally. And Chang-ho? What I do to you will make what happened to So. He looked like a gentle massage. You're bluffing. Call Choi Young-jin, Jinwoo suggested. See if he answers. Or try Kim Sung-min. I'm sure they'll be very available for your calls. Right up until the moment my people grab them off the street. He ended the call and immediately dialed Kang. Move up the timeline. Hit them all now. Right now. Before Chang-ho can warn anyone. We're not fully in position. I don't care. We've lost surprise. He knows we know. We take them now or we lose them. Kang didn't argue because he understood that plans were fluid and advantage was everything. 15 minutes. That's the fastest we can move. Then move. Mini cliffhanger. Across Seoul, in 3 different locations, men who thought they were safe suddenly found themselves surrounded. Choi Young-jin, leaving his office building at 6 p.m. like any businessman, walked into a semicircle of Jinwoo's people blocking his path to his car. Kim Sung-min, stepping out of his Busan hotel for dinner, saw Dongwoo standing in the lobby with a smile that promised pain. And in a Mapogu apartment, Han Jae-bong and Cho Min-sik looked up from their celebration drinks to find the door being kicked open, shadows pouring in like darkness made flesh. The hunt had begun. Jinwoo watched it all unfold through phone cameras and surveillance feeds, each screen showing a different piece of his vengeance clicking into place. He'd moved to a secure observation room in Phoenix Tower, surrounded by monitors displaying real-time footage from multiple locations. Screen 1. Choi Young-jin being loaded into a black SUV, his face showing genuine terror now that the mask of loyalty had been ripped away. He was screaming something, probably protests of innocence, maybe threats, possibly pleas. Jinwoo had the audio muted. He didn't care what Choi had to say. Not yet. Screen 2. Kim Sungmin walking calmly alongside Dongwoo, his expression unreadable. He'd always been the harder one, the one with enough self-control to maintain composure even when the world was ending. That would make breaking him more satisfying. Screen 3. The Mapogu apartment turned into chaos. Han Jae-bong had tried to fight, which had been stupid but expected. Now he was on the floor, hands zip-tied behind his back, bleeding from a broken nose that mirrored what he'd done to Sohee. Cho Min-sik had wet himself, literally, a dark stain spreading across his pants as Kang's men hauled him to his feet. Good. Fear was appropriate. Screen 4. A team was moving on Baek Sang-woo's last known location, a luxury apartment in Gangnam that he apparently maintained for exactly this kind of disappearance. The professional was proving harder to catch, but Jinwoo had people covering every exit, every escape route. It was only a matter of time. His phone rang. Jae-sung. The legal assault on Chang-ho is in motion, his financial advisor reported. I've contacted our prosecutors in Busan, the ones on our payroll. They're opening investigations into Daehan Foods for tax evasion, money laundering, and about 12 other violations. Simultaneously, I've fed information to Chang-ho's rivals in Busan. They're moving on his territory as we speak. Good. What about the Chinese triads? I reached out to our contacts in Beijing. Told them Chang-ho was planning operations in Korea without clearing it with the central leadership. They're displeased. They're sending someone to discuss the situation with him. Which meant the triads were cutting Chang-ho loose, probably planning to eliminate him themselves to maintain their relationship with Jinwoo's organization. The Chinese understood business, and business meant not protecting failed gamblers. The Chilsungpa? Trickier. They've been Chang-ho's partners for years. Jae-sung paused. But I found something interesting. Their current boss, Kang Tae-sik, has a daughter studying at Seoul National University. Medical school. Very prestigious. Jinwoo understood immediately. Everyone has a daughter. The same threat Chang-ho had tried to use against him could be turned around, not as a threat but as a reminder that cooperation was in everyone's best interest. Send flowers, Jinwoo ordered. To Kang Tae-sik's daughter. Congratulate her on her excellent grades. Include a note saying that Seoul is full of opportunities for talented young people, and it would be a shame if anything interfered with her education. Subtle. Subtle enough that it's not a threat, obvious enough that Kang will understand I know exactly where his vulnerability is. Jinwoo watched screen 4, where his team was breaching Baek Sang-woo's apartment. Chang-ho tried to use my daughter against me. Let's see how his partners feel about that strategy when it's pointed at them. The apartment breach played out in real time. Door kicked in, flashbang detonation, figures moving through smoke. But when the team cleared the space, it was empty. Baek Sang-woo was gone, disappeared with the professional efficiency of someone who'd planned escape routes before even accepting the job. He's in the wind, Kang reported over the phone. But he left evidence behind. Passport copies, encrypted USB drives, cash in multiple currencies. He was planning to run all along. Let him run, Jinwoo decided. But put his face everywhere, every airport, every port, every border crossing. And leak to the underground that Park Jinwoo is offering 100 million won for information leading to Baek Sang-woo's location. Dead or alive, but preferably alive. 100 million won was more than most criminals made in a lifetime. Every mercenary, bounty hunter, and ambitious thug in Asia would be looking for Baek now, turning his own profession against him. Sir, one of Kang's men called out from the observation room doorway. The prisoners are in transit. ETA to the Incheon facility is 45 minutes. Do you want to meet them there? Jinwoo checked his watch, 7:17 p.m. In 45 minutes it would be dark, which was appropriate. What he had planned belonged to darkness. I'll leave in 30 minutes, he replied. Have everything prepared. I want the interrogation rooms ready, medical equipment standing by in case they need reviving, and cameras recording everything. This gets documented. All of it. All of it. Jinwoo's voice was steel wrapped in ice. Every word, every scream, every moment of what's about to happen. Because when this is over, every person in our organization will watch this footage and understand exactly what happens when you betray Park Jin-woo. The man nodded and left, and Jin-woo returned his attention to the monitors. On screen 1, Choi Young-jin had stopped struggling, his body gone limp with resignation or shock. On screen 2, Sungmin was staring out the SUV window, his face illuminated by passing streetlights, expression still unreadable. On screen 3, Han Jae-bong was shouting something, probably threats, maybe prayers. None of it mattered. They'd made their choices. Now Jin-woo would make his. He pulled out his phone and called his wife. "It's starting," he said when Yoonji answered. "If you want to watch, meet me at the Incheon facility in 1 hour." "I'll be there," she replied, her voice carrying the same cold certainty he felt. "Jin-woo? Make them suffer." "I will," he promised. "For Sohee. For our family. For every father who needs to know that their daughter is safe because monsters fear the consequences." He ended the call and stood, moving through Phoenix Tower with the purposeful calm of a man executing a plan he'd perfected over 2 decades. Dong-woo met him at the private elevator, already wearing the dark clothes appropriate for the night's work. "Ready?" his brother asked. "I've been ready since 2 a.m. when the phone rang," Jin-woo replied. "Let's go collect our debts." The Incheon facility stood in an industrial wasteland on the western edge of Seoul, surrounded by abandoned factories and shipping containers that had been forgotten by the legitimate world. Jin-woo had purchased the property 12 years ago during the Russian War, when he'd needed somewhere private to remind Seoul's criminals why his name was spoken in whispers. The building itself was unremarkable, gray concrete, small windows, the kind of structure that municipal records listed as a warehouse, but everyone in the underworld knew differently. This was where debts were paid and lessons were taught in blood and bone. Jin-woo's Mercedes pulled through the security gate at 8:03 p.m., followed by 2 SUVs carrying additional personnel. The facility's parking lot was already crowded with vehicles. His people had been arriving for the past hour, preparing everything according to his specifications. Kang met him at the entrance, holding a tablet displaying status updates. "All 5 prisoners are secured. Choi in room 1, Sungmin in room 2, Han and Cho together in room 3. We're still hunting Baek Sang-woo, but the bounty is generating leads. And Chang-ho? Still in Busan, but our surveillance shows increased activity. He's making calls, moving money, clearly preparing for something. He knows we're coming. Let him prepare," Jin-woo said, entering the building. "Fear is half the punishment." The facility's interior was utilitarian, concrete floors, industrial lighting, everything designed for function rather than comfort. A central control room monitored multiple interrogation spaces, each one equipped with cameras recording from 3 angles. Jin-woo moved to the control room first, studying the monitors showing his prisoners. Choi was sitting with his head in his hands, visibly shaking. Sungmin stood in the center of his room, perfectly still, waiting. Han and Cho were arguing, their voices picked up by sensitive microphones. "Fucked, we're so fucked," Cho was saying, his voice high with panic. "Shut up." Han snapped. "We're protected," Chang-ho said. "Chang-ho isn't here. Park Jin-woo is here and we beat his daughter and he's going to kill us." "He can't. We're soldiers. We follow orders. The rules. There are no rules anymore." Cho was crying now, actual tears streaming down his face. "We crossed a line. We all knew it. We just thought the money was worth it." Jin-woo listened to this exchange with cold satisfaction. They were already turning on each other, already breaking before he'd even spoken to them. Good. It would make what came next easier. Yoonji arrived 20 minutes later, dressed in black, her face composed into the mask of someone who'd spent 2 decades as a crime lord's wife. She joined Jin-woo in the control room, her eyes immediately finding the monitors showing the men who'd hurt their daughter. "Which one?" she asked quietly. "Which one hit her first?" "Han Jae-bong. The one with the scar." Yoonji studied the man through the screen, memorizing his face. "I want to be in the room when you question him." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." Her hand found his, squeezed once. "They need to see that we're united in this. That attacking one of us means facing both of us." Jin-woo nodded, respecting her choice. In truth, having Yoonji present would send its own message, that this wasn't just business but family justice, personal and absolute. "We start with Choi," he decided. "He's the weakest psychologically, most likely to break quickly. What he tells us will frame how we approach the others." They walked together through corridors that had witnessed countless interrogations, each set of scuff marks on the concrete floor a memorial to someone who'd learned about consequences. 2 guards stood outside Choi's room, stepping aside as Jinwoo approached. He paused with his hand on the door handle, looking at his wife. Last chance to stay outside. What happens next won't be pleasant. I know, Yoonji replied. Open the door. Choi Young-jin looked up as they entered, and the hope that had been in his eyes died immediately when he saw their expressions. He'd probably been telling himself that this was all a misunderstanding, that he could explain, that 18 years of loyal service would buy him mercy. Now he saw the truth, there would be no mercy. Jinwoo, please, he started. Quiet. Jinwoo's voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through Choi's plea like a guillotine. You speak when I ask questions. You volunteer nothing. You lie and I hurt you. Understand? Choi nodded frantically, tears already forming in his eyes. Good. Jinwoo pulled out a chair and sat, deliberately casual, as if they were just having a business meeting. Yoonji remained standing, her presence radiating cold fury. Let's start with something simple. How long have you been working with Park Chang-ho? 8 months, Choi replied immediately, the words tumbling out. Since the restaurant partnership. He approached me, said he had a proposal. What proposal? He said you were getting old, getting soft. That Seoul needed new leadership, younger vision. He promised me control of all legitimate operations if I helped him take over. Choi's voice was shaking, but the words were coming faster now, a dam breaking. It was just supposed to be financial at first. Move some money, create documentation that would make you look unstable if it came to light. But then he asked for more, Jinwoo supplied. Yes. He wanted information about your family. Routines, security, vulnerabilities. I thought he was just gathering intelligence. I didn't know. Liar. Yoonji's voice was sharp as broken glass. You knew exactly what that information would be used for. You helped them target our daughter. No. I swear, I didn't know about the attack until after it happened. When Chang-ho told me I wanted to back out, but he said I was too deep, that if I tried to leave he'd expose everything. Jinwoo held up a hand, stopping the flow of words. The cologne. So he smelled expensive cologne on one of her attackers. The same brand you and Sungmin wear. Choi's face went white. Sungmin gave Han a bottle. Said it was a gift for good work. I didn't know why at the time, but later I realized. Realized what? Realized it was a signature. A message. Chang-ho wanted you to suspect your closest people, wanted you to tear apart your own organization looking for traitors. It made terrible sense. If so, he had mentioned the cologne without being able to identify which uncle wore it. Jinwoo might have moved against Sungmin and Choi simultaneously, possibly killing both before discovering the truth. More chaos, more instability, exactly what Chang-ho wanted. Who else is involved? Jinwoo asked. Names? All of them. Choi rattled off names like a man reciting a confession. 3 more members of Jinwoo's organization, all relatively junior, all recruited with promises of advancement. 2 members of the Busan Chilsungpa. A Chinese liaison named Chin Wei. And, most importantly, the full details of Chang-ho's plan. He wanted to hit you from multiple angles, Choi explained, words tumbling over each other in his desperation to be helpful. Financial pressure through the stolen money and forged loans. Political pressure through investigations he was going to trigger. Territory pressure by having the coalition move on your holdings. And personal pressure by. He couldn't finish the sentence. By having my daughter beaten in an alley, Jinwoo finished for him, his voice still perfectly calm. By making me choose between looking weak or looking unstable. By betting that either response would create an opening for his coalition to move in. Yes. And you thought this was a winning bet? I thought. Choi's voice broke. I thought 18 years of service would be enough. That after everything I'd done for you, I deserved more than I was getting. Chang-ho promised me respect, real power, not just managing restaurants and laundering money. I was stupid. I'm sorry. Please, Jinwoo, I have children. Everyone has children, Yoonji said coldly. It didn't stop you from helping herd ours. The room fell silent except for Choi's quiet sobbing. Jinwoo studied the man he'd trusted for 18 years, seeing him clearly now, not a loyal advisor, but an ambitious coward who'd bet against the wrong horse. Here's what's going to happen, Jinwoo said finally. You're going to write down everything you just told me. Names, dates, transactions, meeting locations, every detail of Chang-ho's plan. You're going to sign it. And then you're going to record a video confession that will be distributed to every member of my organization and every criminal enterprise in Korea. And then? Choi asked, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer. And then you die, Jinwoo replied simply. Quickly because you cooperated. Painlessly because I'm not a monster despite what Chang-ho thinks. But publicly because everyone needs to understand what happens when you betray me. Choi nodded slowly, acceptance settling over his features like a burial shroud. Can I write a letter to my family? Jinwoo considered it. Choi's wife and children were innocent, had nothing to do with the father's betrayal. Cruelty for its own sake accomplished nothing. You can. They'll receive it after you're dead, along with a settlement that will ensure they're cared for financially. Your betrayal doesn't extend to them. Thank you, Choi whispered and meant it. They left him with paper and pen, guards stationed outside to ensure he didn't try anything stupid like suicide. His death belonged to Jinwoo, was payment for a debt he'd incurred, and wouldn't be escaped through cowardice. Mini cliffhanger. In Busan, Park Chang-ho sat in his private office watching security feeds show multiple vehicles approaching his building. His phone was ringing, the Chilsungpa, the Chinese, various partners in his coalition, all of them suddenly unavailable. He smiled anyway because he'd planned for this possibility. Jinwoo might be coming, but Chang-ho had one more card to play. He picked up his phone and made a call. It's time, he said. Kill the girl. Kill her now. Kim Sung-min's interrogation was different. Where Choi had broken immediately, Sung-min sat in his chair with the calm composure of a man who'd already made peace with whatever was coming. He'd been with Jinwoo for 12 years, had seen what happened in these rooms, knew that lying would only prolong the inevitable. Hyung, he said when Jinwoo entered alone. Yoonji had chosen to sit this one out, watching from the control room. I'm sorry. I don't want your apology, Jinwoo replied, sitting across from him. I want to understand why. 12 years, Sungmin. We came up together, fought wars together, built this empire together. What did Chang-ho offer you that I hadn't already given? Sungmin smiled sadly. He didn't offer me anything. He threatened my family. The words hung in the air, and Jinwoo felt something shift in his understanding of the conspiracy. Explain. 8 months ago, my daughter was studying abroad in Japan. Tokyo University, her dream school. Sungmin's voice was steady, but his eyes held old pain. One day she called me crying. Said strange men had been following her, that she'd found photos of herself slipped under her dorm room door. Photos from inside her apartment, Jinwoo. They'd been in her home watching her sleep. Jinwoo closed his eyes briefly, seeing the architecture of Chang-ho's plan more clearly now. Not everyone could be bought, some had to be coerced. Chang-ho, he said. Chang-ho, Sungmin confirmed. He called me the next day. Said my cooperation would ensure my daughter's safety. My refusal would ensure her death. He showed me proof. His people in Tokyo, his reach, his absolute commitment to hurting me through her if I didn't comply. You could have come to me. And risk her life on your ability to protect her when you're thousands of miles away? Sungmin shook his head. I knew what you'd do, Hyung. You'd try to extract her, bring her home, turn this into a war with Chang-ho that might take months to resolve. I couldn't risk that. So I cooperated. I gave him what he wanted. Information about routines, security gaps, personnel who might be recruited. So he's attack, Jinwoo said quietly. You knew it was coming. I knew something was coming. Chang-ho said he needed leverage against you, something that would make you vulnerable. Sungmin's composure finally cracked, his voice breaking. I swear I didn't know they were going to hurt Zoe. He told me it would be intimidation, a message, nothing violent. When I found out what really happened, I almost called you then. Almost confessed everything. Why didn't you? Because my daughter is still in Tokyo and Chang-ho's people are still watching her. Because the moment I betrayed him, he'd kill her just to prove a point. Sungmin met Jinwoo's eyes. So I stayed in Busan, maintained my cover and waited for you to figure it out. Because I knew you would. You always do. Jinwoo sat back processing this new information. Sungmin wasn't a willing traitor. He was a father protecting his child, caught in an impossible situation where any choice led to someone getting hurt. It didn't excuse the betrayal. But it explained it. Your daughter's name? Jinwoo asked. Minji. She's 20, studying international law. Jinwoo pulled out his phone, made a call. Kang, I need an extraction team in Tokyo. Immediately. There's a student named Kim Minji at Tokyo University. I want her on a plane to Seoul within 3 hours, protected by our best people, completely secure. He listened to Kang's confirmation, then ended the call and looked at Sungmin. She'll be safe by midnight. Chang-ho's leverage against you ends tonight. Sungmin's eyes filled with tears, the first real emotion he'd shown. Thank you, Hyung. Whatever you do to me now, thank you for saving her. I'm not going to do anything to you, Jinwoo said, and watched shock register on Sungmin's face. You're not a traitor. You're a father who made impossible choices to protect his child. I understand that. I'd have done the same. But I betrayed you. You gave Chang-ho information to protect your daughter's life. That's not betrayal, that's survival. Jinwoo stood, moving toward the door. But you are going to help me end this. You're going to call Chang-ho, tell him everything went according to plan, that I'm falling apart and the organization is in chaos. You're going to keep him confident and off balance until I arrive in Busan tomorrow night. And then we're going to show him what happens when you threaten our families. Jinwoo left Sungmin in the room, but the guards remained outside with instructions to treat him as a guest rather than a prisoner. In the control room, Yoonji was watching him with an expression that mixed surprise with approval. You're letting him go, she said. I'm giving him a chance to earn redemption, Jinwoo corrected. He betrayed me under duress, protected his daughter at cost to our security. I can't fault him for that. But he'll spend the rest of his life proving his loyalty. One mistake, one hint of continued betrayal, and I'll kill him and his daughter both. It was harsh but fair, the balance Jinwoo had always maintained between mercy and necessity. And now, Yoonji said, her voice hardening, we deal with the men who actually hurt our baby. Han Jae-bong and Cho Min-sik were brought to a larger room, secured to chairs bolted to the concrete floor. They'd been separated earlier, which had given them time to imagine what was coming. Now, seeing each other again, seeing Jinwoo and Yoonji standing before them, their terror was palpable. This room was different from the others. It had drains in the floor, medical equipment on rolling carts, and tools arranged on a table with careful precision. Everything here served a purpose, and that purpose was pain. Gentlemen, Jinwoo began, his voice conversational, almost friendly. You know why you're here. You know what you did. So let's skip the part where you claim innocence or beg for mercy. You won't receive either. Han tried to maintain some dignity, his jaw clenched, but his eyes kept drifting to the tools on the table. Cho had given up entirely, crying openly, his body shaking with sobs. I'm going to ask you questions, Jinwoo continued. You're going to answer them truthfully. If you lie, my wife will select a tool from that table and I'll use it on you. If you hesitate, she'll select a tool. If you do anything except answer quickly and honestly, she'll select a tool. Clear? Both men nodded frantically. Good. Han, you first. Who hired you? Park Chang-ho through Kim Sung-min, Han replied immediately. 35 million won split between the three of us. Beck got 20, Cho and I got 7.5 each. What were your instructions? Beat the girl bad enough to send a message but don't kill her. Make sure she saw our faces, smelled cologne that would point to someone close to her father. Make it look like street violence but professional enough that everyone would know it wasn't random. And the message you were told to deliver? Everyone has a daughter. We were supposed to make sure she heard that and understood it was a threat to other families if Park Jinwoo didn't comply with demands. What demands? I don't know. I swear, Mr. Park, I was just muscle. They didn't tell me the bigger plan. Yoonji's hand moved to the table, selected a pair of pliers. Han's words cut off in a scream. I want names, Jinwoo said calmly as Han's screaming subsided into whimpers. Every name you know connected to this operation. Every person who knew about it, funded it, approved it. Give me everything or my wife continues selecting tools. For the next 40 minutes, Han and Cho talked. They gave up names, locations, meeting details, payment structures. Everything they knew about Chang-ho's conspiracy. Most of it confirmed what Choi had already revealed, but there were new details. Safe houses in Busan, weapons caches, plans for follow-up attacks if the first one didn't achieve the desired effect. There were also revelations about Baek Sang-woo's escape route, a private boat scheduled to take him from Incheon to China tomorrow at dawn. Jinwoo immediately relayed this to Kang, who redirected resources to the port. When they told everything they knew, when their words had run dry and left only truth behind, Jinwoo looked at his wife. It's time, he said simply. Yoonji nodded, her face showing no mercy, no hesitation. Make it hurt. What followed was systematic, professional, and absolutely brutal. Jinwoo wasn't a sadist, he took no pleasure in causing pain. But he understood the necessity of examples, the mathematics of fear that kept empires stable. These men had beaten his daughter, had left her bloody in an alley, had laughed about it. Now they would pay for every moment of her pain with interest compounded over hours. The cameras recorded everything. Every scream. Every plea. Every moment when they begged for death and were denied. When it was finally over, when both men hung lifeless in their chairs, their suffering finally ended, Jinwoo cleaned his hands with careful precision. Yoonji stood beside him, her face still carved from stone, her eyes dry. "Enough?" he asked quietly. "For them," she replied. "But not for Chang-ho. He ordered this." He laughed. "He threatened our family. He gets worse." "He will," Jinwoo promised. "Tomorrow night in Busan. Publicly. So everyone understands that Park Jinwoo's mercy has limits." They left the facility together at 2:47 a.m., the same time he had been attacked exactly 24 hours earlier. The symmetry was unintentional but appropriate, one cycle of violence ending as another prepared to begin. In the Mercedes driving back through Seoul's sleeping streets, Yoonji spoke quietly. "Will this ever end? This cycle? This violence?" "Not while I'm alive," Jinwoo admitted. "But when Sohee is older, when she has children of her own, maybe then. Maybe they'll live in a world where their safety doesn't require their father to be a monster." "You're not a monster." "No," he agreed. "I'm worse. I'm a monster who tells himself he's protecting something. But the blood on my hands is still blood, no matter how I justify it." They drove in silence after that, two people bound by love and violence, heading home to check on their daughter and plan one final act of vengeance. Tomorrow Busan. Tomorrow Park Chang-ho would learn what 25 years of patience and rage looked like when finally unleashed. Tomorrow the debt would be paid in full. Dawn broke over Seoul with the kind of ethereal beauty that seemed to mock the violence of the previous night. Jinwoo stood on his penthouse balcony watching the city wake up, knowing that somewhere in that sprawl, people were already discovering bodies, Han Jae-bong and Cho Min-sik, dumped in Yongdongpo where the criminal underworld would find them first. The message was clear. This is what happens when you touch Park Jinwoo's family. His phone had been ringing steadily since 6 a.m. Members of his organization calling to confirm loyalty. Rival families calling to reassure him they had nothing to do with the attack. Politicians calling to distance themselves from any investigation that might result. Everyone reading the signs, understanding that Seoul's underworld had shifted overnight. Yoonji was still asleep, exhausted by the emotional toll of the previous night. So he remained at the medical facility, recovering under Dr. Kim's care. And Jinwoo stood alone, calculating the final moves of a game that had been in motion for 8 months without his knowledge. Kang arrived at 7:15 a.m. with updates. Baek Sang-woo has been located. He was trying to board a fishing boat in Incheon, exactly as Han described. Our people intercepted him 10 minutes ago. He's alive, injured in the capture, currently being transported to the facility. Good. Jinwoo sipped his coffee, the bitter taste grounding him. What about Busan? Chang-ho knows we're coming. He's fortified his headquarters, called in all his people, preparing for a siege. Kang paused. He's also made contact with the media. Apparently he's planning some kind of press conference this afternoon, claims he has evidence of Park Jinwoo's criminal empire, and intends to expose it publicly. Jinwoo smiled without humor. A desperate move. He's hoping public exposure will create enough attention that I can't touch him without triggering investigations. Will it work? It might have, if I hadn't spent the past 20 years cultivating relationships with every prosecutor, judge and police captain who matters. Jinwoo set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. Make sure our political contacts know that Chang-ho is about to commit suicide by press conference. Encourage them to preempt his allegations with their own statements about known criminal Park Chang-ho spreading false information to avoid legitimate business investigations. Discredit him before he can speak. Exactly. By the time his press conference happens, he'll be a laughingstock. A desperate criminal making wild allegations. And when he disappears shortly afterward, no one will care enough to investigate deeply. Kang nodded, already making calls to implement the strategy. Jinwoo returned to the view of his city, his mind working through the final sequences of Chang-ho's elimination. They would leave for Busan at noon, giving Chang-ho time to sweat, time to make mistakes, time to realize that all his planning had accomplished nothing except buying him a few extra days of life. A notification on his phone drew his attention. Jae-sung had completed the financial warfare against Chang-ho's empire. Every business the man owned was now under investigation. Bank accounts were frozen. Political protection had evaporated. The coalition he'd built was fragmenting as each organization realized that protecting Chang-ho meant making an enemy of Park Jinwoo. The Chinese triads had already sent word. Qin Wei, their liaison to Chang-ho's conspiracy, had been recalled to Beijing for consultation. Translation. executed for unauthorized operations. The Chilsungpa had sent flowers to Jinwoo's office with a note. Our deepest apologies for any misunderstanding. Kang Tae-sik looks forward to future cooperation. Translation: We're abandoning Changho. Please don't hurt our families. By 10 a.m., Park Chang-ho was alone, his empire collapsing around him, his allies scattered, his protection gone. Now came the ending. Jinwoo visited So-hee before leaving for Busan. She was awake, sitting up in bed, her face still a canvas of violence but healing. The swelling around her eye had decreased enough that she could open it slightly, and the color was returning to her lips. "Appa," she said as he entered. "Mother told me what you did to those men." "I'm sorry you had to know," he replied, sitting beside her bed. "I'm not." Her voice was firm despite the pain speaking clearly caused her. "They hurt me. They enjoyed it. They deserved what they got. No one deserves that, So-hee. But sometimes the world requires examples. Sometimes mercy to one person means cruelty to 100 potential future victims." She studied him with eyes that seemed older than they'd been 48 hours ago. "Are you going to Busan today?" "Yes." "To kill the man who ordered my attack?" "Yes." "Good." So he reached for his hand. "But Appa? After this is over, after you've done what needs to be done, can we try to find a different way? I don't want your grandson to grow up in a world where his grandfather has to be a monster to keep him safe." Jinwoo felt something crack in his chest. His daughter, beaten and traumatized, was still thinking about the future, still hoping for something better than the world he'd built. "I'll try," he promised and meant it. "But So-hee, understand something. The world I've built, brutal as it is, has kept you safe for 19 years. Has kept your mother safe. Has kept thousands of people under my protection safe from worse monsters than me. Changing that world will take time. Then start now," she said simply. "After Busan. After you've settled this debt. Start building something different." He kissed her forehead gently. "Rest. I'll be back tomorrow." "I know. You always come back." The convoy left for Busan at noon. 5 vehicles carrying 20 of Jinwoo's best people, armed and prepared for warfare if Changho was stupid enough to fight. But Jinwoo suspected there would be no fight. Changho had already lost. The drive took 3 hours, Jinwoo spending the time reviewing interrogation footage from Baek Sangwoo. The professional assassin had broken faster than expected, perhaps realizing that maintaining his code of silence would only prolong his suffering. He'd confirmed everything Han and Cho had revealed, added details about Changho's long-term planning, and provided the location of several safe houses where evidence of the conspiracy was stored. All of it was being documented, compiled into a case that would justify everything Jinwoo was about to do. They arrived in Busan at 3:17 p.m., the coastal city spread out beneath gray skies that threatened rain. Changho's headquarters was a 15-story building in the business district, legitimate businesses on the lower floors, criminal operations higher up. Jinwoo's convoy pulled up to the front entrance like a corporate delegation, which in a sense they were. Just a different kind of business than the building's other occupants. Kang sent a team through the loading dock to secure exits while Dongwoo led the main group through the lobby. The building's security guards took one look at the number of armed men and decided unemployment was preferable to heroism. Smart choice. They rode the elevator to the 15th floor in silence, each man checking weapons, adjusting armor, preparing for the possibility that Changho had set a trap. But when the elevator doors opened onto Changho's private office level, they found only an old man sitting behind an expensive desk, hands folded calmly in front of him. Park Chang-ho looked every one of his 58 years, gray hair, weathered face, the kind of body that had been powerful once but was now just tired. He watched Jinwoo enter with eyes that held no fear, only resignation. "You're late," Chang-ho said. "I expected you hours ago." "I stopped to visit my daughter," Jinwoo replied, moving to stand across the desk from his old enemy. "The one your people beat in an alley. She's recovering well, by the way. Wants me to thank you for teaching her valuable lessons about trust and vigilance. She has spirit. Like her father. Unlike her father, she still believes people can change. That the world can be better than we made it." Jinwoo's voice was conversational, almost friendly. "I'm here to prove her wrong." Chang-ho gestured to the window behind him, where Busan spread out toward the ocean. "I built something here, Jinwoo. 25 years of work. Legitimate businesses, political connections, infrastructure that helps the city function. You're going to destroy all of it because I tried to take back what you stole from me in Seoul. I didn't steal Seoul. I won it. Fairly by the rules we both understood. And now I tried to win it back. Also by the rules. Why does that deserve death? Because you involved my family. Jinwoo's voice remained calm, but something ancient and implacable leaked through. You could have come at me directly, Changho. Could have challenged me publicly, built your coalition, made your move. That would have been honorable by the standards of our world. But you chose to attack my daughter. To beat her bloody and leave her in an alley like garbage. That violated the one rule that matters. Everyone has a daughter, Changho said, echoing the message he'd sent. Yes, everyone does. Which is why everyone in Korea needed to understand that touching those daughters is suicide. You've given me that lesson to teach, Changho. You've become the example that keeps 1,000 other daughters safe. So I die to prove your point. You die because you hurt my child, Jinwoo corrected. The point is just a beneficial side effect. Changho stood slowly, moving to the window. I have a confession prepared. Video, audio documents. Everything about the conspiracy, everyone involved. It's set to be released if I don't check in every 6 hours. You kill me and the world knows everything. The world already knows everything, Jinwoo replied. I spent this morning making sure every politician, prosecutor, and police captain in Korea understood that you're a desperate criminal spreading lies. By now your confession, if it exists, is worthless. Just the ramblings of a dead man trying to drag others down with him. Changho's shoulders slumped slightly. Then you've already won. I won the moment you decided to hurt my daughter. Everything after that was just arithmetic. What now? Jinwoo pulled out his phone, opened a video file, and placed it on the desk where Changho could see it. The footage showed Han Jaebong and Cho Min-sik in their final hours, showed what Jinwoo had done to them, showed what awaited men who crossed certain lines. Changho watched in silence, his face draining of color. That's the professional version, Jinwoo said when the video ended. Clinical. Documented. Designed to send a message. But Changho, you get something different. You get the personal version. Because this isn't business anymore. This is family. Jinwoo, please. Everyone in Korea is going to know you attacked my daughter. Everyone is going to know I spent 48 hours hunting you down. Everyone is going to know that when I finally caught you, you didn't die quickly. Jinwoo nodded to Dongwoo, who moved forward with plastic zip ties. Changho didn't resist as his hands were secured. He understood resistance was futile, that the mathematics of violence had already been calculated. There's a warehouse 3 blocks from here, Jinwoo continued. Isolated, soundproof, perfect for this kind of work. We're going to take you there, and I'm going to spend the next 6 hours making sure every criminal in Korea understands that Park Jinwoo's daughter is off limits. Not because I'm cruel, but because examples have to be memorable enough to prevent future mistakes. I'm sorry, Changho whispered. For what it's worth, I'm sorry I hurt your girl. It's worth nothing, Jinwoo replied. But I appreciate the sentiment. Any last words? Anything you want recorded for family? Changho thought about it, then shook his head. Just tell them I died for what I believed in. I'll tell them you died because you forgot that some debts can only be paid in blood. The warehouse sequence is implied rather than shown. Jinwoo maintains his humanity by not reveling in details, but makes clear through distant sounds and time elapsed that Changho's death was neither quick nor merciful. The cameras record everything, and the footage will circulate through Seoul's underworld for years to come. 3 days later, Jinwoo stood in his penthouse watching Seoul's neon skyline pulse with life. So he was home, recovering slowly, learning to smile again despite the scars, both visible and hidden. Yoonji was planning a family vacation to Japan, insisting they all needed time away from the city, from the violence, from the constant calculations of power and control. Kang had reported that Changho's organization was fully dismantled, its assets seized, its people scattered or absorbed into Jinwoo's network. The Busan Chilsungpa had sworn loyalty, desperate to avoid becoming the next example. The Chinese triads had sent an official apology and a gift of rare tea. The politicians had renewed their relationships with careful attention to avoiding future misunderstandings. Seoul's underworld had received the message. Park Jinwoo's family was untouchable. Kim Sung-min had been reinstated to his position, though under closer supervision. His daughter Minji had been brought back from Tokyo and enrolled at Seoul National University, where Jinwoo's people could protect her openly. Sung-min understood that his redemption would take years, that trust once broken was rebuilt slowly through consistent action. Choi Young-jin was dead, his confession released throughout the organization, his family provided for according to Jinwoo's promise. His betrayal had been comprehensive, but his final cooperation had earned him a quick death instead of a prolonged one. The junior members of the organization who'd been recruited by Chang-ho had been given a choice: exile from Seoul forever, or a probationary period of such intense scrutiny that any future betrayal would be impossible. Most had chosen exile. And Jasmine Wright, the American girl who'd found So-hee in that alley, had been offered permanent protection and a job managing one of Jin-woo's legitimate restaurants. She'd accepted, understanding that witnessing what she'd witnessed meant being permanently entangled with Seoul's underworld, but preferring that to the uncertainty of pretending it hadn't happened. She would occasionally have coffee with So-hee, the two young women bonded by trauma and survival, finding something like friendship in the shared knowledge of what violence looked like when it touched innocent lives. Now Jin-woo stood alone in his penthouse. The city he'd ruled for 2 decades spread beneath him like a kingdom made of light and shadow. His phone held a message from So-hee sent an hour ago. "Appa, I know what you did in Busan. Mother told me. I don't like it, but I understand it. Thank you for protecting me. Thank you for making me safe. But please, please, let this be the last time. No more examples. No more lessons taught in blood. Let's find a different way. I love you." Jin-woo read the message for the 10th time, then typed a response. "I love you too, So-hee. And I promise I'll try. For you. For your children. For a world that's better than the one I built. But understand that some debts can only be paid in blood, and protecting you is a debt I'll pay until my last breath." He sent the message and returned his gaze to the city. Tomorrow he would begin the work So-hee had requested, finding ways to transition his empire toward legitimacy, toward a future where power wasn't synonymous with violence. It would take years, maybe decades, and he might not live to see it completed. But he would start. Because his daughter had asked him to. Because even monsters could love their children enough to try becoming something better. 6 months later, a new restaurant opened in Gangnam. The opening was small, tasteful, attended by politicians and business leaders who appreciated the fine Korean cuisine and the elegant ambience. No one mentioned that the restaurant was owned by Park Jin-woo's organization, laundering money through receipt manipulation and inflated supply contracts. No one mentioned that the head chef had once worked as an enforcer before discovering a talent for cooking. No one mentioned that the waitress who greeted customers with such genuine warmth was Jasmine Wright, still protected, still paying back a debt she'd never asked to incur. And no one mentioned that sometimes, late at night after closing, a young woman with fading scars on her beautiful face would sit at the bar with the chef, and they would talk about their shared trauma, how violence had touched them both, how they'd survived, how they were learning to live again. So he was studying psychology now, specializing in trauma recovery. She wanted to help people who'd experienced what she'd experienced, wanted to turn her pain into something useful. Her father supported this completely, funding her education, clearing her schedule of security details when she objected that she felt imprisoned by protection. But there were still bodyguards. Always bodyguards, invisible but present, watching from distances that felt like freedom but were really just longer leashes. Because Park Jin-woo had learned his lesson, family was sacred, and protecting family required constant vigilance. The last shot would be cinematic. Jin-woo standing on his penthouse balcony as rain began to fall over Seoul, each drop catching the neon light, the city transformed into something beautiful and dangerous and eternal. His phone would ring. An unknown number. He would answer. "Mr. Park?" A young voice, scared, desperate. "My name is Minjun. I'm nobody, just a street kid. But I found something you should know about. There's a man, Chinese accent, asking questions about your family again. About your daughter. He's offering money, lots of money, for information. I thought you should know. I remember what happened to the last people who hurt her. I don't want to see that again." Jin-woo would close his eyes, feeling the weight of eternity settling back onto his shoulders. Some debts were never fully paid. Some lessons had to be taught again and again. "Where can I find this man?" he would ask, his voice perfectly calm. And the cycle would continue because that's what cycles do. They continue, eternal, inevitable, fed by human nature and the terrible arithmetic of violence. But somewhere in that cycle, a young woman was learning to smile again. A father was trying to be better than his nature. A city was learning that some lines should never be crossed. And in the darkness between the neon signs, Park Jin-woo stood eternal. A monster who loved his family enough to remain a monster, ensuring their safety through fear and blood and the absolute certainty that betrayal always came with a price. The final line would be delivered in voiceover, Jin-woo's thoughts becoming narration. "They say everyone has a daughter. Chang-ho learned what that means. His coalition learned. Seoul learned. And if someone has to learn that lesson again, I'll be here. Always watching. Always waiting. always ready to remind the world that some fathers will burn down kingdoms to keep their children safe. Welcome to the Forbidden Empire, where loyalty is absolute, betrayal is death, and family is everything. Remember that.